Hello there, and welcome to the Sleepless Scientist, a quiet place in the cosmos where your thoughts can unwind and knowledge becomes a soft lullaby for the night. Tonight's journey will take us through billions of years of gentle transformation as we follow the long, wondrous story of how evolution shaped the human body. From the tiniest cell to the way your fingertips hold a warm mug, from your eyes and their careful calibration of light, to the speech that tumbles gently from your mouth when you greet a friend. Everything that makes you you was once an experiment in survival. But before you settle in and get cozy, I'd love if you could take a moment to like this video and subscribe, only if you truly find these quiet explorations enjoyable. And when you're ready, leave a comment to let me know where in the world you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. It's always such a joy to see all the places we gather from, each in our own little slice of time. Now, feel free to dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for a soft background hum, and let's gently begin our journey into the long sleepwalk of evolution together. And if your mind begins to wander, that's perfectly fine. Let it drift. We'll still be here, quietly unfolding the story. Take a deep breath in and out. Imagine time not in hours or years, but in a slow, unfurling ribbon, stretching backward far beyond memory, farther still past history, into a time when Earth itself was a newborn, young, warm and unsettled. Before there were hearts or hands, before bones, brains or breath, there were just molecules, floating in ancient oceans, nudged and warmed by lightning, volcanic heat, and ultraviolet light from a sky still unfamiliar. They drifted, they collided, and somehow they began to build. No grand architect, no sudden spark, just a slow choreography of chance and chemistry, giving rise to the very first stirrings of life. Tiny bundles of molecules that could copy themselves, not perfectly but well enough to persist. Little bags of potential. The great-great-grandparents of every cell in your body. The earlier cells, simple and bare, didn't even have a nucleus. They fed on chemical gradients and sunlight. But they laid the foundation for everything, and I do mean everything. From these humble beginnings, life began its great quiet experiment. It tried shapes and strategies, some successful, some not. It learned to share, to join forces, to specialize. It began to form colonies, cells working together rather than alone, and eventually those colonies turned into creatures. There was no goal, no final blueprint, just one quiet rule: whatever works continues, and whatever doesn't disappears like a dream forgotten in the morning. Through this soft, stubborn process, limbs began to form, eyes took shape, bodies stiffened with bones. Some creatures stayed in the sea. Others, curious, gasping, crawling, found a way to walk on land. The story of evolution isn't about perfection. It's about persistence, adaptation. Small changes over time layered like sediment, until one day a fish has wrists, and a jaw can chew, and lungs can sip air like wine. Eventually, after an impossible number of sunrises, something remarkable happened. One particular animal stood up on two legs and looked around. Its brain, large and curious, began to wonder, to build fires, to whisper stories, to ask questions about itself. And one day, much later, that same species began to study where it came from, to gaze backward into the shadows of time and ask, how did this body come to be? That's where we are tonight. Together, we'll wander back through that story, not with the urgency of a textbook, but with the calm of a night walk under the stars. We'll trace how each part of you, your spine, your senses, your skin, was sculpted not in a workshop, but over eons by wind, weather, chance, and time. We'll see how your bones remember walking through forests, how your hands still echo the grip of ancient branches, and how your breath, quiet now, carries the memory of oceans. The story of your body is not just your own. It's a layered tale of ancestors, of cells and creatures who never knew you, but shaped you all the same. So tonight, as you rest, let evolution tell you a bedtime story. Not of kings or empires, but of bacteria and bones, lungs and light, instincts and insights. It's a story written in blood and breath, in DNA and dreams, and if you fall asleep along the way, that's perfectly okay. Your body knows the story already. After all, it lived it. Let's begin at the very beginning, not just of humanity or animals or even plants, but before all of that, before the first beating heart, before the first flicker of an eye, even before cells had names or purposes. Let's drift back, farther still, over 3.5 billion years ago. Earth at that time was not the gentle blue marble you know today. It was raw, restless, bubbling with volcanic fury and wrapped in a thick, suffocating atmosphere. And yet, it held promise. Picture a world where lightning cracked across a sky of hydrogen, methane, and ammonia. Where rain fell not in clean drops, but in thick chemical soup. This was not yet a home, but it was a kitchen. The ingredients were there. Carbon, nitrogen, water, heat. And over time, deep time, they began to stir. There's a beautiful hypothesis, often called the primordial soup, that suggests the oceans back then became a simmering pot of amino acids, sugars, lipids, and tiny organic bits, the building blocks of life. They didn't come together with a flash of divine instruction or blueprint. They bumped, floated, reacted, dissolved, reformed. Some molecules linked up in chains, some curled into bubbles, some began to repeat themselves, like a quiet rhythm learning to keep time. This wasn't life, not yet, but it was getting there. And then, somewhere in this strange pre-life orchestra, something extraordinary happened. A molecule began to copy itself. Imperfectly, yes, but just well enough to survive, just well enough to leave a trace of itself behind. This may have been the first whisper of life on Earth. These early replicators weren't cells, and they weren't what we'd call alive by modern standards, but they had potential. They were the ancestors of everything. Your skin, your breath, your thoughts, all of it can trace its roots back to these chemical stumblings in a young ocean under a young sky. We call the earliest truly living entity Luca, the last universal common ancestor. Luca wasn't the first life, but it's the one that made it. The one whose descendants would go on to become bacteria, fungi, whales, and eventually us. Luca probably lived in deep-sea hydrothermal vents, those bubbling mineral towers at the bottom of the ocean where warmth and chemistry meet. It was a simple creature, or rather, a very sophisticated bag of molecules. It likely didn't have a nucleus. It didn't think or feel, but it could harvest energy. It could grow. It could reproduce. And it could pass on tiny instructions, fragments of code, to its offspring. Interestingly, metabolism, how cells process energy, may have come before DNA. Some scientists believe early life didn't begin with information, but with motion, with energy gradients. Picture a rock sitting in sunlight. It doesn't do much, but now imagine a tiny bubble, one that uses that heat to pump a proton here and a sugar there. That's the beginning of something interesting. The earliest life forms were prokaryotes, cells without a nucleus. Still around today, these ancient microbes are masters of survival. Bacteria, for instance, were among the first to invent photosynthesis, long before plants were even a dream in evolution's imagination. They figured out how to turn sunlight into sugar, a brilliant leap turning the sky into food. They lived in mats, layered in slimy communities we can still find fossilized as stromatolites. These formations, layer upon layer of ancient microbial life, are some of the oldest fossils on Earth. You can still see them today, frozen whispers of that first quiet life. And through it all, time just kept moving. These tiny cells kept living, dividing, evolving. Millions of years passed, and then billions. The planet changed. Oceans cooled, atmospheres shifted. Still, life clung on, tweaking its chemistry, solving problems it didn't even know it had. These first chapters of life weren't dramatic. No predators, no prey, just simple persistence. And yet from that simplicity would come all the majesty we know. The trees and teeth, the wings and whispers, the dreams and the dialogues. All of it, every heartbeat you've ever felt, every breath you've ever drawn, rests on the shoulders of molecules that once floated in a warm sea, trying, failing and trying again. So if you've ever felt small, remember this. Your body carries the memory of oceans, of lightning storms, of early persistent life. You're not separate from this planet. You are its story, a continuation of a spark that began not in a lab or a legend, but in the quiet shuffle of atoms long before names existed. And that spark, carried gently forward through time, is still glowing softly inside you. As the single-celled world matured, something remarkable began to stir within the invisible landscapes of the microscopic. These simple prokaryotic cells, small, self-reliant, efficient, had ruled Earth for billions of years. Their world was one of solitude, where each cell managed its own affairs, processing nutrients, replicating and navigating its watery surroundings alone. It worked well. In fact, it works so well that bacteria still dominate the planet in sheer numbers today. But evolution, ever curious, seems to favour new arrangements now and then. And deep in this microbial past, a strange partnership began to take shape. Imagine two single-celled organisms. One is larger, lumbering but capable of engulfing things. The other is smaller, agile and particularly good at processing energy. In most cases, this kind of encounter would end predictably, with the smaller cell being digested, but not always. There's a theory, now widely accepted and beautifully supported, that one such encounter didn't end in consumption. Instead, it became cooperation. The smaller cell took refuge inside the larger one, and instead of being broken down, it began to offer something valuable: energy. In return, the host offered protection and nutrients. Over generations, this arrangement became more than just mutual tolerance. It became endosymbiosis, a living together from the inside. The small cell, likely a kind of aerobic bacterium, gradually gave up its independence, transferring much of its genetic material to the host and becoming what we now call a mitochondrion. Mitochondria are often described as the powerhouses of the cell, and that metaphor, while perhaps overused in high school biology classrooms, is still fairly accurate. They take in oxygen and nutrients, and through a series of chemical reactions produce ATP, the energy currency of life. What's quietly astonishing is that mitochondria still carry a trace of their ancient autonomy. They have their own DNA, their own ribosomes, and even replicate independently of the cell's nucleus. Every mitochondrion in your body is a living memory of that ancient alliance. But the story doesn't end there. A second symbiotic event likely occurred in early plant ancestors. This time, the guest cell was a cyanobacterium, one capable of photosynthesis. Instead of just digesting sunlight for itself, it began doing so for the host as well. This is how chloroplasts came to be, and it is why plants, algae and some protists can transform sunlight into sugar. Like mitochondria, chloroplasts retain their own genetic traces, tiny whispers of their bacterial past. These two events, first mitochondria, then chloroplasts, were turning points in the history of life. They allowed cells to become more efficient, more complex and ultimately more ambitious. No longer did they have to handle every task alone. They could delegate. They could specialise. They could form internal teams with certain compartments, doing energy work, others handling genetic information, and still others managing transport and structure. This compartmentalisation marked the birth of the eukaryotic cell. If you're listening to this right now, nestled in a blanket, perhaps feeling the slow rhythm of your breath, your entire body is made of eukaryotic cells. And every one of them, whether in your skin, your brain or your bones, is the descendant of a cell that struck a bargain billions of years ago. It's a quiet kind of miracle that your ability to think, to breathe, to sleep is built on the back of a microbial alliance. Endosymbiosis isn't just a one-off biological footnote, it's a profound lesson. It tells us that evolution doesn't only reward competition, it also favours cooperation. Cells that could have devoured each other instead found a way to live together. They built trust, not in a conscious sense, of course, but in a molecular one. One cell said, in effect, "I'll keep you safe if you keep me running," and together they did more than survive. They thrived. This shift didn't happen overnight. It was no dramatic handshake or treaty. The transition from independence to interdependence occurred gradually, over generations beyond counting. Genes were lost or merged. Cell walls softened. Metabolisms aligned. The boundaries between host and guest blurred until they became one. The beauty of this story lies in its subtlety. There were no drums announcing the dawn of complex life, no grand proclamation. Just one cell letting another stay. Just two microscopic entities, bound by convenience, writing the first pages of biological complexity together. Even now inside you, mitochondria continue their quiet work. They process the oxygen you inhale and the food you eat, breaking them down into energy that fuels every heartbeat, every blink, every thought. They were once outsiders, now indispensable. Without them, your body would stall in seconds. It's easy to forget them, tucked away in the deep machinery of your cells, but they are there, still honouring that ancient pact, still keeping the flame of life burning. So that the next time you feel tired or energised or simply alive, remember this. A long time ago, survival meant more than being strong or fast. It meant being open. Evolution isn't just a tale of the fittest, it's also a story of the wisest alliances. And deep within your cells, that wisdom endures. If you could travel back in time to a shallow pond around 2 billion years ago and scoop up a drop of water, what you'd find inside that droplet would be deceptively simple. Just a handful of single-celled organisms drifting slowly, dividing quietly, living entirely alone. They didn't talk, they didn't think, and they didn't interact beyond absorbing nutrients or reproducing. Each cell was its own world, self-contained, self-reliant. And for a very long time that was enough. But over time, and across countless generations, some cells began experimenting with something strange. Proximity. Instead of drifting off after division, they stayed close. Instead of complete independence, they began to linger near their kin. This wasn't affection, of course. Cells do not crave company in the way we do. But from a survival standpoint, it made sense. In groups, cells could help buffer each other from changes in temperature, share byproducts, and create more stable internal environments. A lone cell might die when conditions shifted, but a cluster could shield its inner members from the worst of the storm. At first, these gatherings were loose and temporary. Colonial organisms, nothing more than clusters of similar cells holding on by a thin layer of sugar or protein. But as the clusters persisted, the potential for specialization began to emerge. One cell might by chance become better at anchoring the colony. Another might absorb nutrients more efficiently. Still, another might be slightly more tolerant of sunlight or acidity. Rather than competing with each other, these cells found an advantage in cooperation. A quiet transition was underway. We still see this kind of cellular cooperation today in modern-day slime moulds. At a glance, they look like simple blobs of mucus clinging to logs or leaves. But if you examine them closely and give them time, they reveal one of the most intriguing behaviours in biology. Slime moulds begin life as individual amoeba-like cells, each living alone and feeding independently. But when food becomes scarce, something remarkable happens. They come together, literally. They fuse into a single coordinated organism that can move as a unit, find new environments and even solve basic mazes. It's astonishing. A group of cells with no brain, no nerves, no leader manages to organise itself in pursuit of a common goal. They signal each other chemically. They take on different roles. They act, if not consciously, then effectively, as one. This kind of collaboration was the soil from which multicellularity grew. Over evolutionary time, what began as a cluster of similar cells became a tightly coordinated system. Natural selection favoured groups where cells didn't all do the same thing, but instead divided up the labour. Some handled structure, others digestion, others reproduction. The cells began to specialise, but specialisation requires sacrifice. Once a cell commits to a certain role, say forming part of the outer layer of an organism, it often loses the ability to reproduce. It becomes functionally sterile, giving up its potential to make more of itself in order to support the whole. This shift, from autonomy to interdependence, is one of the most profound in evolutionary history. It's the biological equivalent of giving up a solo career to join an orchestra. You lose a bit of your freedom, but the music you can make together becomes far more complex. This is what multicellularity is at its heart. A union built on division. Not division in the sense of conflict, but of labour. Cells stopped being generalists and started being specialists. And with that, the first rudimentary body plans began to form. We don't know exactly how many times multicellularity evolved. It likely arose independently in different lineages, including animals, plants, fungi, and algae. But in each case, the result was the same: complexity. With more parts doing more specific jobs, life could grow in size, develop tissues, shape organs, and interact with the environment in entirely new ways. Movement became more precise, feeding became more efficient, reproduction became more sophisticated. And critically, organisms could now evolve not just through changes in their genes, but through changes in how their cells were arranged, connected, and coordinated. At this stage in evolutionary history, bodies were still soft and small, simple filaments, sheets, and blobs. But the groundwork had been laid. The individual was no longer just a single cell floating through the ocean. The individual had become a community, a living collection of parts, all working together towards survival. And perhaps the most incredible part is that this transformation wasn't driven by any central planner or grand vision. There was no command centre instructing cells how to arrange themselves, no architect drawing up blueprints. It happened through trial and error, through the quiet testing of arrangements over generations. What worked stayed, what didn't simply faded. Even today, your body carries echoes of this long experiment. Every cell you contain is both an individual and a team player. It has its own tasks and its own boundaries, but it belongs to a larger system, a body that grew from a single cell into trillions. That one fertilized egg, the very first you, didn't grow into a person by copying itself blindly. It did so by dividing and then diverging, by trusting that different parts could do different things, and that somehow they would still fit together. So tonight, as you rest, remember that your body is a testament to cooperation, not just among people or societies, but deep within you, at the level of your cells. Each heartbeat, each breath, each blink is a silent nod to those early colonies that chose to stay together, to specialise and to build something greater than themselves. They didn't know they were making a body, but they were, and in doing so, they made the future possible. By the time the first multicellular organisms had established themselves in the oceans, a quiet revolution had already begun. It wasn't the kind of revolution that came with noise or chaos, but one that unfolded slowly, generation after generation, as cells began to relinquish their independence for something greater, a shared purpose, a collective identity, a body. Multicellularity is more than just a group of cells living together. It's not a pile of stones, it's a cathedral. It's not a crowd, it's a choreography. And to function as one, something profound had to evolve. Trust. a cellular kind of trust, built not on emotion or awareness, but on chemical signals, reliable interactions, and an intricate division of labour that would ultimately give rise to tissues, organs, and the complexity we associate with life today. In a single-celled organism, every task, feeding, movement, repair, reproduction, must be handled by one tiny entity. The cell is a multitasking machine doing everything itself. But as cells began to specialise, that burden could be shared. One group could focus on structure, anchoring the organism to a surface. Another could take on the role of defence, sensing changes in the environment and responding to threats. Others could concentrate on digestion, reproduction, or communication. The result wasn't just convenience, it was power. When you let different parts of a system focus on what they do best, efficiency increases, complexity becomes sustainable. Life, once restricted by the limits of one cell's capabilities, could now explore new forms, new movements, and new environments. This is the beauty of division of labour. It opens the door to possibility. Take the sponge, for example, one of the simplest multicellular animals still alive today. It doesn't have nerves or muscles or organs in any traditional sense, but it does have specialised cells. Some beat tiny hair-like cilia to keep water moving through the sponge's porous body. Others trap and digest particles from that flowing water. Still others form the sponge's outer surface, keeping it intact and protected. And despite its simplicity, the sponge works. It feeds, it grows, it reproduces. It is, in every sense, a coordinated being. In more complex animals, this specialisation took on even greater roles. Cells formed muscle fibres capable of contracting in unison to create motion. Others became neurons, extending long filaments to communicate across distances. Some turned into epithelial cells, forming linings and layers that could absorb, secrete, and protect. And as this cellular choreography grew more intricate, entire tissues formed. Tissues gave rise to organs. Organs assembled into systems: digestive, respiratory, circulatory, nervous. And together they created what we now call a body. But with this increase in complexity came the need for control. Coordination became essential. Cells couldn't simply act on their own anymore. They had to respond to signals, respect timing, follow the patterns encoded in DNA and refined through millions of years. Development became a symphony of instructions, genes turned on and off in precise sequences, telling each cell where to go, what to become, and when to stop. This process, known as cellular differentiation, begins in the earliest stages of life. A single fertilized egg divides into 2, then 4, then 8, forming a ball of identical cells. But soon, subtle chemical gradients begin to influence those cells. Some migrate inward, others remain on the surface. Some begin producing proteins that their neighbours do not. Gradually, identity emerges, not just a cell, but a skin cell or a liver cell or a neuron. Each one carries the full blueprint of the organism's DNA, but each reads a different chapter. And what's more astonishing is that this identity is often permanent. A heart cell cannot become a lung cell on a whim. It commits. It gives up the flexibility of youth in exchange for function, stability, and contribution to the whole. In this way, multicellularity mirrors a kind of silent citizenship, each cell choosing its role, fulfilling its duties, and trusting that the others will do the same. Of course, not everything in biology is perfect. Sometimes cells don't follow the rules, they divide when they shouldn't, migrate where they're not needed, or forget their specialised role. When this happens in your own body, the result can be illness, even cancer. But in the vast majority of cases, your cells remain astonishingly faithful to their assignments. Every second of your life, your tissues are performing their quiet rituals, your blood carrying oxygen, your kidneys filtering waste, your skin regulating temperature, all without you having to ask. And if you listen closely beneath the hum of daily life, you might begin to sense this hidden cooperation. the pulse beneath your wrist, the warmth in your chest, the way your eyes stay moist, and your balance holds steady, even as you shift in your seat. These are not random gifts. They are the result of a billion-year experiment in multicellular design. They are the echoes of cells that long ago agreed to work together, to sacrifice autonomy for harmony, and to build something larger than themselves. Tonight, as you settle into rest, remember that your body is not just one thing. It is a cathedral of cells, each with its own task, its own rhythm, its own small wisdom. And together they form you, not just in shape or function, but in the quiet resilience that keeps you alive. In the next part of our journey, we'll follow this coordinated body as it begins to take on new forms, developing bones, a spine, limbs that walk, and hands that shape the world. But for now, let's linger here at the cellular level and give quiet thanks for the millions of tiny players that brought you here, not with fanfare, but with a gentle, unbroken will to live. There's a quiet strength that runs down the centre of your body. You might feel it when you stretch in the morning or sit up just a little straighter. It's the spine, not just a stack of bones, but a memory of movement, protection, and evolutionary ingenuity. Without it, your body would collapse like a tent without poles. But long before it held up your shoulders or anchored your ribs, the spine was just an idea whispered into existence by nature's long, patient experiment. To understand the origin of this essential structure, we must return once more to the ocean, where early animals swam with simple, soft bodies and little internal scaffolding. Among these drifting forms, a new kind of creature appeared, one with a firm rod-like structure running along its back. This was the notochord. It wasn't made of bone, and it didn't segment like a modern spine, but it offered something valuable: rigidity without brittleness, a flexible core that resisted compression while allowing the body to bend and swim with precision. The notochord is the quiet ancestor of every vertebrate's backbone. Even today, in the earliest stages of human development, you grow one. It forms before your spine does, serving as a kind of scaffold around which the vertebrae will later take shape. And in certain animals, like lancelets and tunicates, it remains the main support structure for life. But in most vertebrates, it is gradually replaced, vertebra by vertebra, with a bony column that can bear weight, allow controlled movement, and guard something profoundly delicate: the spinal cord. The spinal cord, nestled safely within that bony tunnel, is a river of signals. It connects your brain to the rest of your body, delivering commands and returning sensations. Without it, your limbs would not respond, your organs would not adjust, and your body would feel like a silent room with the lights off. Protecting this neural lifeline became a critical task for evolution, and thus the spine was not just about support, but also about shielding the electrical language of life. As vertebrates diversified, so too did their spines. In fish it remained long and flexible, perfect for the flowing sideways motion of swimming. In amphibians and reptiles, the vertebrae stiffened in places to handle the stresses of walking or slithering on land. And in mammals, including you, the spine became a dynamic column of curves and interlocking joints, capable of holding the body upright, absorbing shock, and adapting to an astonishing variety of postures and movements. You may not think about it often, but your spine is a masterpiece of compromise. It must be strong yet flexible, protective yet responsive. It curves gently in several directions, forming an S shape that balances your head over your hips and helps distribute weight when you walk, stand, or sit. Its discs, those soft pads between each vertebra, allow it to bend and twist without breaking. And its many muscles, ligaments, and tendons work together in a quiet symphony, keeping you stable yet mobile. But the spine is not just a column, it is a platform. It supports the skull, allowing your brain to perch above the body like a lighthouse on a hill. It anchors your ribs, forming the cage that protects your lungs and heart. It provides attachment points for your limbs, giving you leverage to move, climb, dance, and rest. Every movement you make, no matter how small, ripples through your spine like a wave through a tree's trunk. In early human ancestors, the spine had to adapt to a new kind of challenge: bipedalism. Standing upright placed new demands on the skeleton. The spine had to bear the full weight of the upper body while maintaining balance and flexibility. To do this, it developed additional curves, first in the neck to balance the head, and then in the lower back to align the torso over the hips. These curves are what let you walk on 2 feet without toppling forward. They are what keep you upright, even when gravity would rather pull you down. Of course, this design isn't perfect. The very curvature that allows us to stand also makes us prone to back pain, slipped discs, and posture problems. Evolution, after all, does not aim for flawlessness. It works as with what it has, tinkering incrementally rather than redesigning from scratch. The human spine is not a product of ideal engineering, but of repurposed parts. It is a marine structure pressed into terrestrial service, a compromise, a solution that works well enough to survive. And yet, there is something beautiful in that imperfection. Your spine tells a story of movement through water, of weight carried on land, of balance learned over millennia. It is both ancient and immediate, formed by creatures long extinct, yet still active every time you turn your head or take a step. So as you lie down tonight, with your spine gently settling against the surface beneath you, remember this: within you is a structure shaped by time and struggle, by swimming and walking, by bending and bearing. It is not just a support beam, it is the root of your form, the central thread in your body's unfolding. It holds you, it moves with you, and it remembers what came before. There is something quietly astonishing about the way your feet press into the ground. Each step you take may seem ordinary, almost thoughtless, but it carries echoes of a momentous transition in the story of life. Long before feet existed, long before ankles, toes, knees, or hips, limbs were fins, and the world was water. Creatures drifted, darted, and pulsed through oceans and rivers, their bodies suspended in a fluid medium that buoyed them, supported their weight, and softened every movement. There was no need for knees or heels or the calluses that line the soles of your feet. The sea was everywhere, and life belonged to it completely. But over time, shallow waters gave way to muddy edges. Rainfall filled temporary pools. Rivers formed banks and receded. And some creatures, drawn by food, safety, or mere curiosity, began to linger near the boundary between sea and land. This boundary was more than physical. It was physiological, gravitational, environmental. It was a challenge, and evolution met it. Not with a single leap, but with a long, experimental crawl. One of the most celebrated fossils from this transition is Tiktaalik, a creature that lived roughly 3-5 million years ago. It had gills, yes, but also lungs. It had scales and fins, but inside those fins were bones that looked eerily familiar. Structures resembling a humerus, radius, and ulna, the same bones in your upper and lower arm. Tiktaalik could likely prop itself up in shallow water, push against the mud, and maybe even drag itself for short distances. It was not a walker in any modern sense, but it was trying. This slow shift from aquatic to terrestrial life was not an event, but a process. It took millions of years. Early tetrapods, four-limbed vertebrates, began to appear, with limbs better suited for pushing and lifting rather than paddling. Their joints grew stronger, more flexible. Shoulders detached slightly from the skull to allow greater freedom of movement. Pelvises broadened and fused more tightly with the spine to support body weight. Feet formed. Toes spread out like little anchors, distributing force against the solid earth. But perhaps the greatest challenge wasn't just movement, it was gravity. In water, buoyancy reduces the burden on bones and muscles. On land, everything is heavier. A creature that once glided now had to carry itself. Its organs pulled downward. Its blood no longer flowed easily without the help of pressure systems. Limbs had to be not only strong, but balanced. Evolution had to account for friction, for heat, for dehydration, for entirely new ways of interacting with the environment. The lungs, once a supplemental system in some fish, took centre stage. Gills, efficient for extracting oxygen from water, collapsed in air, but lungs, those soft spongy sacs, could draw in atmospheric oxygen, filtering it through thin membranes and sending it to the bloodstream. Animals that mastered this system could breathe without water. They could stay longer on land, explore farther, survive drier spells. And with breath came rhythm. The rise and fall of lungs, the pulsing of a heart, the slow coordination of limbs. Together they created a new tempo for life. Creatures learned to walk, not in the way mammals do now, but with awkward, side-to-side motions. Their limbs stuck out to the sides, their bellies often dragging. But over time, those limbs rotated downward beneath the body. Muscles reorganized. Joints became hinge-like, allowing forward movement with greater efficiency. Gaits improved, balance stabilized. Eventually, these land dwellers spread. Some returned to the water, others evolved into reptiles, birds, and mammals. But in all of them, no matter the shape of their stride, you can still see the legacy of that first great migration. The structure of your arm and leg, the arrangement of your fingers and toes, even the way your neck balances your head, all owe something to that journey from fins to feet. The footprints of early tetrapods preserved in stone tell quiet stories. Some show hesitation, as if the creature stopped often, unsure of its path. Others show confidence, a rhythmic pattern of steps leading across a once wet surface. These prints are not just impressions in mud, they are messages written across time saying, "We were here, we tried, we moved forward, and now every time you walk across a floor or step over a puddle, or curl your toes beneath a blanket, you're repeating that message in your own quiet way. You are the continuation of a body that found its way out of the water. A body that stood up, balanced itself, and began to walk. This transition wasn't just anatomical, it was existential. The moment life became untethered from water was a moment of both liberation and vulnerability. On land there was room to grow, to see farther, to find new food and avoid new dangers. But there was also exposure. To the sun, to dryness, to falling. Every adaptation carried a trade-off. Bones became stronger but heavier. Movement became more efficient but more energetically costly. Breathing brought oxygen but also the risk of drying out. Yet still life persisted. It explored, it adapted. And now here you are, a descendant of all that effort. Your legs, though shaped by the modern life, are built on ancient blueprints. Your breath, steady and silent, flows through lungs that echo the same structures early landwalkers once developed. Your spine, once a swimmer's axis, now bears your weight as you cross streets, climb stairs, or simply stand still. So if you ever pause in a quiet moment and feel the subtle stretch of your calves or the ache of your feet after a long day, consider this. Those feelings are not just signs of weakness, but reminders of inheritance. They are how your body whispers its history to you. You're not just walking, you are walking on the memory of fins. Run your fingers across your arm. What you feel isn't just surface, it's survival. That thin, often overlooked layer called skin is one of evolution's quiet masterpieces. It wraps around you like a soft armour, not made of metal or stone, but of cells, living, dying, and constantly renewing themselves in a cycle older than memory. Your skin, though easily taken for granted, is among the most sophisticated interfaces between life and the world. And long before it was touched by your own hand, it was touched by time. In the ocean, early life had little need for the kind of protective barrier we now recognise as skin. Water provided a buffer, maintaining temperature, supporting structure, and reducing exposure to the harsh environment. Cells floated or clustered, occasionally shielded by simple membranes or gelatinous coatings. But when life began to explore the land, when creatures emerged from buoyant waters to brave dry air, sunlight, dust, and temperature swings, A new kind of covering was needed. Skin evolved not as decoration but as defense. It had to hold moisture in, keep dangers out, regulate heat, and still allow sensation and interaction. For early terrestrial animals, losing water through evaporation was a serious threat. So evolution sculpted new kinds of cells, keratinocytes, which produce keratin, a tough fibrous protein that helps waterproof the skin. In reptiles, keratin forms thick scales. In mammals, it shapes into softer, more elastic layers. In both cases, it was the same idea: create a boundary that breathes but doesn't break. And then there was the sun. On land, creatures were suddenly exposed to ultraviolet radiation, an invisible danger that could damage DNA and threaten survival. To protect against this, the skin began producing melanin, a natural pigment that absorbs UV light and disperses it as heat. The more sun a creature was exposed to, the more melanin it often produced. Over time, skin colour became an adaptation, a balance between sun protection and the body's need to produce vitamin D, a nutrient synthesized in the skin through sunlight. But skin didn't stop at shielding. It also became a thermostat. Mammals with their high metabolisms needed a way to cool down. So sweat glands evolved, tiny openings that released water to the surface of the skin in where it could evaporate and carry heat away. This system, remarkably efficient, allowed early hominins to run long distances in the heat of the African savanna, outlasting prey by persistence rather than speed. You might not think of sweat as a triumph, but in evolutionary terms, it's a superpower. And all the while, skin remained a communicator. Even now it tells stories, a blush spreading across your cheeks, goosebumps rising on your arms, a gentle warmth in your hands as they touch someone else's. These are not just passive reactions, they are messages, translated in biology, sent and received without a word. Skin is where your inner worlds becomes visible. If you look closer, the skin is not one thing but many. It is layered. The outermost part, the epidermis, is composed of cells that die as they rise to the surface, creating a protective shield of dead tissue that is continually worn away and replaced. Beneath that lies the dermis, a thicker, more complex layer filled with blood vessels, nerve endings and collagen fibers. It's here that sensation begins, the ability to feel texture, temperature, pain, pressure. Touch is not just skin deep, it travels through a network of sensors embedded in the very fabric of your being. Below the dermis lies the hypodermis, a layer of fat and connective tissue that cushions your organs, stores energy and helps regulate temperature. Together, these three layers form an ecosystem of protection, perception, and presence. Your skin is alive, and it is always at work even as you sleep. Over time, different animals adapted their skin in different ways. Some grew scales, others feathers, others fur. Mammals developed oil glands to keep their skin supple, and hair to provide insulation and tactile feedback. Human skin, relatively hairless compared to our primate cousins, adapted to radiate heat more efficiently. Our ancestors needed to stay cool while hunting under a punishing sun, and our skin obliged. We lost the dense fur. We kept the sweat. Yet even stripped of fur, our skin remains richly expressive. Facial muscles move beneath it, sculpting expressions that can convey joy, anger, worry, and affection. Wrinkles map the passage of time. Scars tell stories of injury and healing. Moles and freckles and birthmarks create constellations on the landscape of the body, each one shaped by genetics, environment, and experience. In modern life, it's easy to forget all that skin does. We wash it, clothe it, sometimes even judge it. But beneath every surface layer is a record of resilience. Skin remembers the climates of your ancestors. It responds to your emotions. It protects you from a world that rarely notices how exposed we are. Tonight, as you lie still and feel the air brush against your face, or the sheets settle lightly across your arm, consider how much effort went into that simple sensation. Consider the billions of cells, the silent glands, the sensory nerves, and the pigments that made it possible. Your skin is not just a boundary. It's a living, adapting interface between your inner world and everything that touches it. It holds your shape, it shields your essence, and in its quiet way it speaks. If you pause for a moment and place a hand gently against your chest, you might feel it. That steady rhythmic thump that has accompanied you every moment of your life. Your heart, though no larger than your fist, performs an ancient dance. It pulses not with thought or command, but with a kind of quiet persistence, a contract signed long ago in the depths of evolutionary time. It doesn't wait for instruction. It simply does what it was shaped to do. Beat, circulate, endure. But the heart did not begin as the intricate four-chambered organ we know today. Its origins trace back to the simplest loops and pulses, rudimentary vessels that moved fluids by contracting gently, rhythmically, with no real valves or divisions. In the earliest multicellular organisms, as bodies grew larger and more complex, passive diffusion was no longer enough to deliver nutrients and oxygen to every corner. These organisms needed movement, not just of limbs or muscles, but of life-sustaining substances within them. And so the circulatory system began its long journey towards complexity. At first, there were open systems, fluids flowing freely through body cavities, washing over organs rather than moving through discrete channels. This method worked for insects and small invertebrates, whose low metabolic needs meant oxygen and nutrients could still reach their destinations without precision. But in animals that grew larger, faster and more metabolically demanding, this casual method wasn't sufficient. They needed pressure, direction, a pump. The earliest vertebrate hearts were little more than muscular tubes. They contracted in waves, pushing blood forward in a single direction. Over time, as demands increased, these tubes began to fold, bulge, and divide. Chambers emerged, first 2, then 3, then, eventually, 4. Each refinement allowed more control, greater separation of oxygen-rich and oxygen-poor blood, and better efficiency in delivering vital substances to tissues and organs. Parallel to this development was another transformation, perhaps even more dramatic, the evolution from gills to lungs. Aquatic creatures breathed by passing water over gills, where thin membranes extracted oxygen and released carbon dioxide. But gills collapse in air, their delicate structure useless outside the supportive environment of water. For life on land, a new strategy was needed. Some early fish had already developed primitive lungs, outpouchings of the gut that could hold air. In oxygen-poor water, these adaptations allowed them to gulp air at the surface. As vertebrates ventured onto land, these simple air sacs became the foundation for true lungs. Intricate, branched structures designed to maximize surface area while minimizing water loss. Thin-walled alveoli, surrounded by capillaries, became the stage on which gas exchange would occur. Oxygen passed from air to blood. Carbon dioxide travelled in reverse. And so breath met blood in a quiet exchange repeated, millions of times each day. To move this blood, fresh with oxygen from the lungs, to every part of the body, the heart had to evolve further. In amphibians, the heart has 3 chambers, 2 atria and 1 ventricle. This design allows some mixing of oxygenated and deoxygenated blood, which limits efficiency but works well enough for animals with moderate metabolic needs. In reptiles, a partial septum begins to separate the ventricle, reducing mixing. But in birds and mammals, the transformation completes. A full septum divides the heart into 4 distinct chambers, 2 atria and 2 ventricles. Now oxygen-rich blood from the lungs flows through the left side of the heart and is pumped to the body, while oxygen-poor blood returns to the right side and is sent to the lungs for reoxygenation. This closed-loop system minimizes waste, maximizes efficiency, and supports high levels of activity. The 4-chambered heart is a marvel of evolutionary engineering. Each beat is a coordinated contraction. The atria receive, the ventricles push, valves open and close with perfect timing, ensuring that blood moves forward, not backward. Arteries carry it away, veins bring it home. Every organ, every cell relies on this rhythm. This evolution was not just anatomical, it was functional. It allowed mammals and birds to become warm-blooded, to maintain constant internal temperatures even in varying environments. Warm-bloodedness, or endothermy, requires a tremendous amount of energy, and thus a circulatory system capable of keeping up with demand. The four-chambered heart delivers, quietly and consistently without pause or complaint. Even now as you listen, your heart continues its work. It adjusts subtly to your posture, your breath, your temperature. It responds to hormones, to emotion, to activity. It speeds up when you run, slows down when you sleep, and never once stops to ask why. Its rhythm is older than thought, older than bones, older than speech or sight, and the blood it moves is not just a liquid, it is a river of life. It carries oxygen, nutrients, hormones, waste. It brings heat to the skin and immune cells to the site of injury. It is messenger, transporter and protector. Red blood cells, tiny flexible discs, move through capillaries so narrow they must fold themselves to pass. Each one carries hemoglobin, a protein that binds oxygen with almost poetic precision, releasing it only when needed. And then, once the delivery is made, it gathers carbon dioxide and returns for the exchange to begin again. It's easy to forget all of this when the body feels calm, but beneath your stillness, a current is always flowing, a pump is always working, lungs are always expanding and releasing in a quiet duet with the heart. Together they sustain you. So tonight, as you drift towards sleep, take a moment to feel the soft rise and fall of your breath. Listen, if you can, to the distant echo of your heartbeat. You're not a machine, but a living system, a creation of rivers, chambers and waves. And all of it, every beat, every breath, is part of a rhythm shaped by time, refined by need, and carried forward in the silence of your chest. Take a moment, if you will, to look at your hands. Observe the lines in your palm, the way your fingers curve naturally inward, the slight resistance as you flex and extend each joint. These hands, so familiar, so responsive, carry within them a story that stretches across oceans, jungles, savannas, and time itself. They are not simply tools or extensions of your will, they are symbols of an ancient and ongoing relationship between the body and the world it touches, grasps, builds, and transforms. In the beginning, of course, there were fins. In the watery world where vertebrates first evolved, limbs were broad, flattened paddles, perfect for pushing against currents, steadying movement and offering subtle control in an environment of buoyant resistance. Early fish used these structures to navigate coral reefs and muddy shallows, but within the bones of those fins, hidden under layers of muscle and skin, were the seeds of something more. Embedded there was a primitive pattern of segmentation, the blueprint for what would in time become wrists, elbows, shoulders, and eventually the dexterous hands you use to hold a pen, peel an orange, or tuck in a child at night. The fossil record gives us a few precious glimpses into this transformation. Among the most important is Tiktaalik, that now familiar bridge between fish and early landwalkers. Tiktaalik's fins were not fins in the traditional sense. They contained bones arranged in a way remarkably similar to modern limbs, structures that could bend at a proto-wrist, providing support in shallow water or on soft land. This creature likely used its limbs to prop itself up, to push through vegetation or over sun-warmed mud flats. In doing so, it was not just moving through its environment, it was beginning to interact with it in new and unprecedented ways. As vertebrates made their home on land, limbs diversified. Digits emerged, first as broad, stubby projections, and later as more distinct fingers and toes. These digits allowed for finer control, better balance, and eventually manipulation. But it wasn't until the rise of mammals, and in particular primates, that the hand as we know it began to truly unfold. Primates living in trees needed to grip. Branches are not predictable. They sway, they taper, they fork. To move through a forest canopy requires balance, depth perception, and most critically, precision. Evolution responded by giving primates hands with more flexible joints, greater sensitivity, and a remarkable new feature, the opposable thumb. The opposable thumb is often celebrated, and rightly so. By allowing the thumb to touch the pads of the other fingers, it created the possibility of a precision grip. This meant that a primate could not only grasp something, it could hold it delicately, turn it, inspect it, manipulate it. The world became not just a landscape to move through, but a collection of objects to be examined, altered, even created. The hand was no longer just for holding on. It was becoming a partner in thought. In humans, this trend reached extraordinary levels. Our thumbs are longer and more mobile than those of most other primates. Our fingers have lost some of their curvature, better suited now to manipulating tools than to swinging from trees. The pads of our fingertips are richly packed with nerve endings, allowing us to feel textures, temperatures, and tiny changes in pressure with exquisite detail. Combined with the development of the human brain, particularly the motor and sensory areas devoted to hand function, this gave rise to a kind of feedback loop. The more capable our hands became, the more our brains adapted to use them. And the more our brains evolved, the more finely tuned our hands became in return. With this newfound dexterity, early humans began to shape their world. They chipped stones into blades, they tied reeds into ropes, they carved bone into needles and wood into shelter. These were not just survival strategies, they were expressions of agency, acts of intention, foresight and imagination. The hand allowed our ancestors to move beyond instinct and begin a dialogue with the material world. A dialogue that continues even now in the way you type a message, slice vegetables for dinner, or trace the edge of a photograph tucked in a drawer. But hands were not only builders, they were also communicators. Long before language took its modern shape, gestures helped convey warning, invitation, reassurance or threat. A raised palm to stop, a pointing finger to guide, a cradled motion to soothe. These nonverbal signals, still vital in conversation today, emerged not from speech, but from the body, and the hand was its most fluent voice. Even in silence, your hands speak volumes. And yet, for all their sophistication, hands remain grounded in their past. The bones of your wrists still reflect the ancient arrangement found in early tetrapods. The muscles that allow you to flex your fingers follow patterns established in climbing ancestors. Your fingernails, now used for fine manipulation or absent-minded tapping, are evolutionary cousins of claws. Every movement they make is built on inherited blueprints, slowly adjusted over millions of years. At rest or in motion, your hands are never just mechanical instruments. They are the culmination of adaptation, curiosity and necessity. They allowed our species not only to survive, but to transform the planet, to paint on cave walls, to construct monuments, to write music, and eventually to hold another hand in quiet solidarity. So tonight, if your fingers feel tired, or you find yourself rubbing your palms together for warmth or comfort, remember that these hands carry history. They are not simply yours, they are the latest verse in a long song of survival. Through them, you touch not only the objects of today, but also the echoes of what made you. And in every grasp, every gesture, every gentle touch, they remind you, you are shaped to shape. Close your eyes for a moment. Let darkness et les sombres settle over you. Now imagine the first glimmer of light, just the faintest difference between brightness and shadow. Not a shape, not a colour, not an image, just light. That simple contrast, that elementary flicker, was all the earliest eyes needed to begin their long evolutionary journey. Before any animal could truly see, it first had to sense that the sun was there. This began not with lenses or pupils, but with scattered pigment molecules buried in the surface of a primitive organism. These molecules responded to photons of light, reacting chemically to their presence. And over many, many generations, they became specialized. They concentrated into small patches, forming clusters of photoreceptor cells. These patches didn't produce pictures, but they helped animals detect where the light was and where it wasn't. That distinction alone was enough to guide movement, avoid danger, or seek warmth. It was a beginning. As organisms became more complex and mobile, the usefulness of light sensitivity increased. A flat patch of photoreceptors could be shaped by evolution into a slight cup, which could then sense the direction of light. If the cup grew deeper, with a narrower opening, it could detect a movement across the visual field. Eventually, a translucent covering formed, then a primitive lens. Slowly, through the natural selection and countless small improvements, the basic camera eye emerged. This kind of eye, the one with a lens focusing light onto a light-sensitive surface, is what you and most other vertebrates have today. But surprisingly, we're not the only ones. The same basic eye design also evolved in cephalopods like octopuses and squid. What makes this so fascinating is that their ancestors and ours diverged hundreds of millions of years ago, back when most life was still swimming or crawling along the seafloor. Despite this enormous gulf in ancestry, nature arrived at a nearly identical solution to the problem of vision. This is convergent evolution, when two unrelated organisms independently evolve similar traits, not because of shared heritage, but because of shared challenge. And yet the details differ. In vertebrates like humans, the retina, the layer of light-sensitive cells at the back of the eye, is wired in reverse. Light must pass through layers of cells before reaching the photoreceptors. It's not the most elegant design, but it works well enough. In contrast, cephalopods have no such backward arrangement. Their photoreceptors face the light directly. As a result, they don't have a blind spot where the optic nerve exits the eye. We do. It's a quiet imperfection, a shadow in your field of view that your brain fills in without you noticing. Despite these quirks, our eyes are marvels of precision. The human eye can detect a candle flickering in complete darkness from over a mile away. It can distinguish more than 10 million colours, focus in and out with tiny, muscle adjustments, and shift its gaze hundreds of times per second without conscious effort. Light enters through the cornea, is bent by the lens, and projected onto the retina, where specialised cells, rods and cones, translate photons into electrical impulses. Rods are highly sensitive and allow us to see in dim light, though without colour. Cones, which come in 3 varieties, let us perceive a wide range of hues under brighter conditions. These signals travel through the optic nerve to the brain, where they are assembled into a coherent picture. But what you see isn't simply what reaches your eyes. It is also what your brain expects to see, what it interprets from memory and context, and what it filters out as irrelevant or distracting. In that way, vision's not just a passive intake of images, it's an active process of construction. You don't just see, you make sense of seeing. And sight doesn't evolve in isolation, it is shaped by need. Predators evolved eyes that face forward, giving them depth perception for chasing prey. Prey animals often have eyes on the sides of their heads, offering a wide field of view to detect danger. Nocturnal animals have larger pupils and more rods. Birds of prey have a higher density of cones, allowing them to spot a mouse from high in the sky. In every case, the design of the eye mirrors the life it must support. Colour vision too tells an evolutionary story. Many mammals, including our distant ancestors, had limited colour perception, mostly shades of blue and green. But some primates evolved additional types of cones, allowing them to see red and orange hues. Why? Likely because ripe fruit often appears in those colours. Seeing it meant finding food faster. In time, the world became not only more visible, but more vivid. What began as light and dark became a full spectrum of sensation. Even the tiny involuntary motions your eyes make, called saccades, play a role in how you perceive the world. These constant micro-level adjustments help refresh your image of your surroundings, preventing visual fatigue. Without them, even the most vibrant scene would begin to fade into blankness. So much is happening behind your eyes every second, and yet you rarely notice. You simply look, you glance, you blink, you see. But vision is not a given. It is a gift, one that was assembled piece by piece over hundreds of millions of years, refined not by foresight but by feedback. It is an emergent marvel sculpted by time, necessity, and light. And tonight, as your eyes begin to grow heavy and the light around you dims, let them rest with the quiet knowledge that they have done their work well. They have helped you read faces, find your way, glimpse beauty, and connect with the world. They are not just organs, they are time travellers, carrying with them the story of light, shadow, and everything in between. Hearing as you experience it now feels almost effortless. The rustle of a page, the hum of a distant fan, the warmth in a loved one's voice. All of it reaches you through vibrations in the air, subtle ripples that your ears interpret with astonishing precision. But long before ears were tuned for melody or speech, they served a different, equally vital purpose: balance. To understand how the ear came to be what it is, you have to go back to the water, where vertebrate life began. In that fluid, buoyant world, movement and orientation were sensed not by ears but by lateral lines, delicate rows of sensory cells along the bodies of fish. These cells could detect changes in water pressure and flow, giving early animals the ability to sense nearby motion, avoid obstacles and maintain direction. It wasn't hearing in the way we know it, but it was a foundation, the ability to detect vibration. Some of these lateral line structures became more refined over time, folding inward to forming closed sacs that could sense not only motion in the environment, but also the position of the body itself. These structures eventually gave rise to the vestibular system, the part of your inner ear that lets you know where you are in space, whether you're upright, spinning, tilting, or still. Inside your head, hidden deep in the temporal bone, this ancient system still hums along. 3 semicircular canals, arranged in perpendicular planes, detect rotational movement through the shifting of fluid. 2 additional sacs, the utricle and saccule, respond to gravity and linear acceleration. When you move, the fluid within these tiny canals shifts, bending microscopic hair cells that send signals to your brain. Even with your eyes closed, your body knows which way is up. That sense of orientation, so easy to overlook, began not with ears but with the subtle language of water and motion. But as life moved on to land and air became the medium through which vibrations travelled, a new challenge emerged. Detecting sound, vibrations in air is far more complex than sensing movement in water. Air is thinner, less consistent. Vibrations dissipate quickly. To hear well, animals had to develop mechanisms to gather sound, focus it, and convert it into something the nervous system could interpret. The solution was not a single invention, but a gradual repurposing of parts. In early tetrapods, portions of the jaw began to evolve into structures that could transmit sound. The stapes, originally a bone in the gill arch, became the first middle ear bone, capable of carrying vibrations from the outer environment into the inner ear. In reptiles and amphibians, this single bone sufficed, but in mammals, 2 additional bones joined the system, the malleus and incus, both derived from jaw elements. Together, these 3 bones, often called the ossicles, formed a tiny articulated chain capable of amplifying sound with exquisite sensitivity. The journey of these bones, from the mouth to the ear, is one of evolution's most elegant detours. What once helped creatures chew became part of a system that let them hear. It's as if nature, always tinkering, found a new use for an old part. And that transformation allowed mammals to detect a wider range of sounds, especially the high-pitched vocalizations that would eventually be used for communication, bonding, and warning. The cochlea, the spiral-shaped structure in the inner ear, became the next major advancement. Within it, sound waves are converted into neural signals. As air vibrations enter the ear canal and hit the eardrum, they are passed through the ossicles, amplified, and sent into the fluid-filled cochlea. There, tiny hair cells tuned to different frequencies vibrate in response. Some respond to low tones, others to high ones. These vibrations are turned into electrical impulses that travel through the auditory nerve and into the brain, where they are interpreted as sound. Every voice you've ever heard, every bird call, every song, each was translated by this system of ancient balance organs, repurposed bones, and cellular amplifiers. And just as the eyes do more than register light, the ears do more than register sound, they provide spatial awareness. You can tell whether a sound is coming from the left, the right, above, or behind, even with your eyes closed, because your brain compares the timing and intensity of sound waves as they reach each ear. But the ear is not only functional, it is expressive. The human voice, shaped in part by what the ear can hear, became a powerful tool for emotional connection. Whispered words, laughter, singing, all rely on a shared sensitivity to pitch, tone, and rhythm. And our ability to hear high-frequency sounds may have played a role in the evolution of speech. The range of human hearing, from about 20 to 20,000 hertz, matches the range of our vocal capabilities. It's no accident. Evolution crafted ears not only to listen, but to understand. Even now your ears are quietly working, picking up on environmental cues you may not consciously register. A creaking floorboard, the hum of electricity, the wind outside the window. They help you locate yourself, respond to threats, or simply feel grounded in a space. And when they're overwhelmed by too much noise, too many frequencies, the body often withdraws, seeking silence as a way to reset. And in silence, something interesting happens. The inner ear doesn't stop. It continues to sense, to balance, to adjust. When you lie down in bed and close your eyes, it's the vestibular system that tells you you're now horizontal. When you rise in the morning and feel a momentary sway, it's those semicircular canals recalibrating. Even in stillness, the body listens. So tonight, as your surroundings grow quieter and the world begins to soften into the hush of rest, think of your ears not just as receivers of sound, but as ancient instruments of balance and perception. Shaped by water or refined by air, they remain with you, always attuned, not only to the world outside, but to your own sense of place within it. Breathe in, gently, without even trying, you're pulling in invisible messengers. Fragments of the world carried on the wind, rising from the ground, drifting from another body, another moment, another memory. Before you ever see a danger or taste a meal, you smell it. Long before our ancestors spoke, before they walked upright or carved stone, they smelled the air. And often that was enough. The sense of smell, olfaction, is among the oldest in evolutionary history. Even simple ancient organisms had ways to detect chemicals in their environment. For bacteria, it might be a way to swim toward nutrients or avoid toxins. For worms and early multicellular life became a compass in the dark, pointing toward food, safety, mates, or warning of decay. Over time, this primitive chemical sensing evolved into something far more complex and refined, a rich internal language for interpreting the outer world. Your own nose is part of this lineage. Inside your nasal cavity lies a patch of tissue called the olfactory epithelium, where specialized neurons, olfactory receptor cells, wait to bind with the countless scent molecules that waft into your nostrils. These molecules are absurdly small, just arrangements of atoms in the air, but your body responds to them with precision. The average human can distinguish over 1 trillion distinct odours, many of which are tied to emotion and memory more directly than any visual or auditory input. When a scent molecule binds to a receptor, it triggers an electrical signal that travels not to the logical analytical cortex, but to the olfactory bulb, which is intimately connected with the limbic system, the part of the brain responsible for emotion, motivation, and memory. That's why the smell of bread baking can bring you back to your grandmother's kitchen, or the scent of pine needles can pull you into a forest from years ago. Smell doesn't ask permission. It arrives, and memory rises with it. This emotional connection is no evolutionary accident. For our ancestors, recognizing the smell of rotting meat could mean avoiding illness. Detecting the musk of a predator could trigger the necessary fear response long before any claw was visible, and the scent of another human, family, foe, or potential mate could mean the difference between safety and danger, between connection and isolation. In many animals, scent remains the dominant sense. Dogs, for instance, have over 300 million olfactory receptors compared to our modest 5 or 6 million. They don't just smell a cookie, they smell its flour, sugar, butter, oven time, and the hand that baked it. They track time and distance through odour, a skill that humans, though greatly diminished in scent sensitivity, once relied on more than we do today. Still, traces of this reliance remain. Even if you don't notice it consciously, your brain is continuously processing the olfactory environment around you. Changes in scent can alert you to spoils, food, gas leaks, smoke, illness, or even subtle shifts in someone's mood. Pheromones, chemical signals used by many species, still shape human behaviour in ways not fully understood. Scent guides without needing to explain, and taste too is not separate from this story. What you call taste is mostly smell. The flavour of a strawberry or coffee or grilled cheese sandwich is a combination of taste molecules and aromatic compounds. When you have a cold and your nose is congested, food tastes flat, not because your tongue has stopped working, but because your sense of smell is silenced. Still, the tongue plays its own role. Along its surface are taste buds, each containing multiple receptor cells that can detect 5 basic types of taste: sweet, salty, sour, bitter, and umami. Each one tells a different evolutionary tale. Sweetness signals energy-rich sugars, rare in the ancient world and thus worth seeking. Saltiness points to essential minerals the body can't produce on its own. Sourness often indicates unripeness or spoilage, prompting caution. Bitterness is nature's red flag. Many poisons are bitter, and the body has learned to mistrust the taste. Umami, a more recent addition to our understanding, reflects the presence of amino acids, particularly glutamate, and often appears in protein-rich foods like meat or fermented products. Together, these tastes formed a kind of early survival toolkit. A lick, a nibble, a sniff. These could provide critical information before a meal became a mistake. And as with smell, taste helped create not only bodily responses, but emotional landscapes. Comfort food isn't just about nutrients, it's about memory. Flavour is a story you carry in your mouth. Over time, culture and cuisine took these raw survival tools and transformed them into art. Spices were traded across continents. Recipes became rituals. Entire identities formed around flavours, textures, smells. Yet beneath all of this sophistication remains the ancient function: to guide, to protect, to draw in and warn away. So much of this system still works silently. When you taste a fresh tomato or recoil from sour milk, you're responding to chemistry, yes, but also to millions of years of adaptation. Your preferences, your dislikes, your cravings, your aversions, they are shaped not only by upbringing and habit, but by the ghostly fingerprints of evolution. And when you prepare food, when you breathe in a familiar scent, when you find comfort in a taste passed down through generations, you're not only feeding yourself, you're participating in an ancient dialogue between body and world. One that began with single cells drifting toward a nutrient and continues now with a hand-stirring soup. So tonight, if there's a scent lingering in the room, or a flavour still dancing on your tongue from dinner, let it anchor you. Let it remind you of what your body remembers, even when your mind forgets. You are shaped by the need to taste, wisely, and smell carefully. Those old instincts still live within you, and sometimes they whisper back with the softest trace of cinnamon or rain or firewood. Before you learn to speak, to walk, even to see with clarity, you learn to feel. It was the earliest language, one without vocabulary but full of meaning. A parent's warm hand, the cool air of a room, the rhythm of a heartbeat pressed against your ear. Long before conscious memory, touch was your guide. And though you may think of it now only in terms of pressure or texture, the truth is far deeper. Touch is not merely a sense, it is a system of connection, of awareness, of emotional presence. It is how you first came to know the world. The skin, your body's largest organ, is where this dialogue begins. Spread across its surface are millions of specialized cells, mechanoreceptors, thermoreceptors, and nociceptors, each tuned to different kinds of input. Some respond to light brushes, others to sustained pressure. Some signal warmth, others coolness. Still others send alerts of damage or pain. These signals travel not in isolation, but along vast networks of nerves that carry them to the spinal cord and from there to the brain. In the brain a remarkable structure awaits. The somatosensory cortex, a strip of tissue stretched across the top of your head, just behind the central sulcus. It functions like a map, organising touch sensations by body region. But the map is not drawn to scale. It exaggerates the parts of you that are richest in receptors. Your hands, your lips, your hair. These areas occupy far more space in the brain than your back or torso, even though the latter cover more physical area. This distorted map, sometimes called the sensory homunculus, reflects how the brain prioritizes sensitivity over size. Touch isn't uniform, it comes in layers. A feather across your forearm is processed differently than the pressure of standing barefoot on a stone floor. The embrace of a loved one, the sting of a scraped knee, the heat of a sun-warmed wall, all involve different receptors, different nerves, different thresholds. And yet all of them meet in the same central hub where they are sorted, filtered and translated into experience. Beyond its mechanical role, touch holds deep emotional power. In mammals, gentle stroking activates a unique type of nerve fibre known as C-tactile afferents. These fibres respond not to sharp or sudden pressure, but to slow, affectionate contact, the kind of touch found in grooming, caressing or comforting. The signals they send don't go directly to the somatosensory cortex, but instead to brain regions linked with emotion and social bonding. This kind of touch is less about information and more about feeling safe, accepted and loved. It's no coincidence that touch plays such a profound role in early development. Infants deprived of physical contact often struggle to thrive, even when all other needs are met. Holding, rocking, skin-to-skin contact, these are not luxuries. They are essentials, hardwired into our biology. They shape how we regulate emotion, how we connect with others, how we perceive the boundaries of our own bodies. And this capacity remains throughout life. The way we shake hands, hug, pat a shoulder, or avoid contact altogether, all carry layers of cultural and individual meaning. Touch can soothe, assert, invite, or reject. It's both deeply personal and quietly universal. A single touch can convey what words cannot. From an evolutionary perspective, this makes perfect sense. Touch is immediate. It requires no translation. In a world where survival depends on detecting both danger and comfort, a rapid, visceral signal is often more effective than one that requires thought. A burn on the skin doesn't need explaining. It demands a reaction. So does the cold. So does the sudden pressure of a hidden thorn. The body doesn't ask if it should flinch, it already has. But not all touch leads to pain or pleasure. Much of it is simply information. Your feet feel the surface you walk on. Your clothing presses against your skin. A fly brushes past your cheek. These signals may not demand attention, but they're always there, creating a quiet background awareness that helps you navigate the world without constantly thinking about your own shape or position. This is part of proprioception, your sense of your body's position in space. It's related to touch, but draws on deeper signals from muscles, joints, and the inner ear. Without it, you wouldn't be able to walk with your eyes closed or reach for something in the dark. You'd lose track of where your limbs are. And yet, like many bodily systems, proprioception works best when unnoticed. Its silence is its success. Pain, too, is a kind of touch. Not one we welcome, but one we depend on. It is the body's way of signalling damage or risk. An evolutionary alarm that draws immediate attention. Without it, injuries would go unnoticed. Dangers would linger. Some rare conditions cause people to feel no pain at all. And while it might sound like a gift, it is, in truth, a perilous burden. Pain teaches. Pain protects. And just as quickly as pain can rise, touch can also calm. A weighted blanket, a hand on your back, the soft pressure of a cat settling on your lap. These sensations activate the parasympathetic nervous system, slowing the heart rate, easing tension and signalling safety. The same nerves that respond to injury also respond to care. So tonight, as you rest, you may become aware of your body against the mattress, of sheets against your skin, of the slow inhale and exhale rising from your chest. All of that, too, is touch. All of that is part of the map your mind draws every moment, reminding you where you are and what you are. A body not adrift, but located, connected. Your skin listens and your brain replies. And in that quiet dialogue, the world becomes knowable, not just through thought or sight, but through contact. In the earliest oceans, long before thought, memory, or even proper movement, there was still a need to respond. Even the most primitive creatures had to make decisions, however simple, toward the light or away, contract or relax, retreat or continue drifting. And from that simple requirement, from the elemental need to choose, something astonishing began to unfold. The nervous system. The very first steps toward neural coordination can be found in creatures like jellyfish. Floating quietly through the water, their bodies are guided not by a brain, but by nerve nets, a lattice of interconnected cells that transmit signals in a decentralized fashion. There's no command center, no master controller. Instead, sensation and action flow together in loops and feedbacks. If one side of a jellyfish encounters a disturbance, that part contracts, and the message ripples outward, prompting the rest to follow. These animals don't think as we do, but they still respond. Their nerve nets are among the earliest blueprints of a living system that senses and acts. As evolution progressed, bodies grew larger and more complex, tentacles lengthened, muscles thickened, behaviours diversified. Simple nets became insufficient. Coordination demanded structure, something more efficient than signals slowly wandering through a mesh. The solution was found in centralization. Longitudinal nerve cords that could rapidly transmit information from one end of the body to the other. This was the beginning of something closer to a spine. In flatworms and other early bilateral animals, we see paired nerve cords running along the length of the body, often connected by transverse fibres, a crude but functional network that allowed for directional movement and more refined behavioural responses. The innovation was not in the materials, nerve cells had existed for eons, but in the layout. Information now had a preferred route, a way to reach distant parts of the body with more speed and precision. Eventually, this led to the formation of a neural tube, a hollow structure that develops in embryos of all vertebrates. In you, it forms during the first few weeks of life, rolling inward from a sheet of cells and sealing itself shut like a soft, living scroll. The tube's front end swells and folds to become the brain, while the rest elongates into the spinal cord. This architecture, simple and elegant, has been preserved across vast stretches of time. Fish, birds, reptiles, mammals all carry some version of this ancient design. And within that design came another leap forward: myelin. Myelin is a fatty substance that wraps around certain nerve fibres, acting like insulation around a wire. It allows electrical signals to travel faster and farther, jumping between tiny gaps in the coating called nodes of Ranvier. The result is a dramatic increase in speed and efficiency. Where once a signal may have crept along at a sluggish pace, it now races, allowing swift coordination between brain and limb, sense and response. Without myelin, your reflexes would be dulled, your movements clumsy, your thoughts slower to assemble. It is not a glamorous feature. It doesn't glow or pulse or generate thoughts, but like so many silent structures in the body, its impact is profound. It made fast movement possible. It made precise coordination real. It opened the door to behaviours that required timing, nuance, and complexity. And perhaps most importantly, the nervous system allowed for internal representations of the external world. With centralised processing, what we now call a brain, organisms could begin to model their surroundings, store information, compare inputs, even anticipate outcomes. The shift from merely reacting to reflecting was not sudden. It happened in increments over millions of years, but each step brought new possibilities. Learning, memory, problem-solving, choice. In early fish, we see the beginnings of true brains, clusters of neurons specialised for sight, smell, motion, and balance. In amphibians and reptiles, these clusters became more defined. In mammals, they expanded dramatically. Evolution didn't design the brain all at once. It built upon what was already there, layer by layer, region by region. The hindbrain, the oldest part, controls basic functions like breathing and heartbeat. The midbrain adds coordination and alertness, and the forebrain, growing steadily larger in more social and adaptable species, handles emotion, decision-making, and eventually the self. In many ways, your nervous system is a timeline etched in flesh. The structures closest to your spinal cord are the oldest, both evolutionarily and developmentally. As you move outward and upward through the brain, you pass through the stages of ancestral history. The medulla, the pons, the cerebellum, the thalamus, each bears the marks of earlier creatures who swam, crawled, or climbed. And then comes the neocortex, that vast wrinkled surface where thought and language reside. But even the neocortex rests on what came before. So tonight, as your muscles relax and your breath slows, think of the quiet pathways beneath your skin. Think of the fibres running down your spine, the tiny pulses leaping across synapses, the myelin-sheathed highways carrying messages from fingers to brain and back again. None of it requires your attention. It works in the background, always, until something goes wrong. And even then, it tries to adapt, to root, to protect. Your nervous system is not just a feature. It is the thread that binds your senses, your thoughts, your body and your past into a single, continuous experience. And all of it began long ago with the simple need to respond. In the quiet chamber of your skull sits a structure unlike anything else in nature. A complex, folded, whispering organ that not only receives the world, but reshapes it. Your brain is more than just a control centre. It is a storyteller, a pattern seeker, a forecaster. And the story of how it came to be, how it grew in both size and sophistication, is not a tale of raw scale alone, but of selective need, social pressure and environmental opportunity. The evolutionary term encephalization refers to the increase in brain size relative to body size. It's not just about how big the brain is, but how big it is compared to the rest of the organism. A whale's brain is enormous in volume, but much of its mass is proportionate to its body. In contrast, the human brain, while smaller overall, is disproportionately large for our size. This ratio is often described using the encephalization quotient, EQ, a number that compares the actual brain size of an animal to what would be expected for its body size. In this framework, humans sit high on the list, but numbers, while useful, don't tell the full story. For early vertebrates, brains were modest. They coordinated basic survival behaviours: find food, avoid danger, reproduce. Over time, certain regions began to expand: the olfactory bulb for smell, the optic tectum for vision, cerebellum for coordination. But in mammals, particularly in primates, the most striking growth occurred in the forebrain, especially the cerebral cortex. This is where planning happens, where memories are integrated, where problem-solving takes root. The cortex began to fold and wrinkle, not because complexity demanded it, but because space was limited. More surface area meant more processing power. and the brain adapted by compacting itself into curves and grooves like a tightly packed cloth. But why grow such a hungry organ? The brain is metabolically expensive. It consumes about 20% of your energy at rest, even though it accounts for only about 2% of your body weight. For evolution to support such a costly investment, the benefits had to be extraordinary. And they were, though not in the ways we often imagine. It wasn't just intelligence in the abstract that drove brain expansion, it was social living. Among primates, species that live in larger, more complex groups tend to have larger brains, especially in regions associated with social cognition, such as the prefrontal cortex. Being part of a social group requires constant calculation. Who is dominant? Who can be trusted? What is the right moment to share, to compete, to retreat? It demands memory, emotional awareness, empathy, and sometimes strategic deception. In many ways, the brain grew because relationships demanded it. This is sometimes called the social brain hypothesis, and it helps explain why humans developed not just large brains, but brains tuned to the thoughts and emotions of others. Language would eventually emerge to support this, more on that tune, but even without words, gestures, glances, and shared attention shape the architecture of the mind, survival favoured those who could understand others not only as objects, but as beings with their own minds. Environmental challenges also played a role. As early hominins moved from dense forests into open savannas, they faced new predators, more scattered resources, and unpredictable climates. Problem-solving became essential. Tools helped. So did fire, but neither could be used without planning, memory, and the ability to teach. These pressures selected for brains that could imagine alternate futures, remember past events, and modify behaviour based on changing conditions. As the brain expanded, so did its internal specialisation. Different areas became responsible for different functions, some for language, others for spatial awareness, others for impulse control or decision-making. But this wasn't a patchwork of isolated units. The brain thrives on integration. Fibrous highways, like the corpus callosum, connect the left and right hemispheres, while loops and circuits allow constant communication between sensory input, memory, emotion, and motor output. The result is not just a big brain, but a deeply interconnected one, a system that doesn't merely react, but anticipates, doesn't just remember, but reflects. And yet, even this capacity comes with trade-offs. Our large brains made childbirth more dangerous. The human pelvis, adapted for walking upright, limits how wide the birth canal can be. To compensate, human infants are born earlier in their development than most other animals, effectively premature. A newborn's brain is still growing, still wiring itself, still building its internal model of the world. This necessity led to another defining feature of human evolution: extended childhood. No other animal depends so long on the care of others. Human children take years to walk, speak, and fend for themselves, but that long dependency is not a weakness. It's a learning window. It allows the brain to absorb languages, behaviours, cultural practices, and emotional cues. A slower maturation process gives time for richer development, and in that slowness, complexity grows. Even now, your brain continues to adapt. Neuroplasticity, the ability of neural circuits to change with experience, remains active well into adulthood. You're not simply the product of ancient biology. You're also the author of your ongoing neural story. Every time you learn something new, revisit a memory, or solve a small problem, your brain subtly rewires itself, responding to the shape of your life. So tonight, as your thoughts begin to slow and your mind wanders into quieter territory, remember that what rests inside your head is not merely a machine or a tool. It is a living record of challenge and adaptation, of emotion and strategy, of solitude and connection. It has grown not just to think, but to feel, to imagine, and to understand. You carry the legacy of brains that survived fire, storm, hunger, and heartbreak, not by strength alone, but by learning what could not be seen, by sensing what could not be spoken, and by finding meaning in each other. Imagine watching someone yawn. You see the stretch of their jaw, the narrowing of their eyes, the deep, slow breath. And before you can stop it, you yawn too. You weren't tired. You weren't bored. But something inside you mirrored what you saw, as if your brain quietly borrowed the gesture and acted it out. This strange, reflexive imitation is more than a quirk. It's a window into one of the most remarkable adaptations in the story of your brain, the evolution of mirror neurons and the rise of empathy. The discovery of mirror neurons came almost by accident in the early 1990s. A group of researchers studying motor activity in macaque monkeys noticed something unexpected. Certain neurons in the monkey's brain would fire not only when the monkey performed a task like reaching for a peanut, but also when it watched a researcher do the same thing. The monkey was still, but its brain acted as if it too were reaching. These cells, later called mirror neurons, appeared to activate in response to both action and observation. At first, the implications were unclear, but as the research expanded, a larger picture began to form. Mirror neurons were not just passive observers, they were internal simulators. They allowed an organism to understand another's behaviour by mentally rehearsing it. If I see you grasp an object, part of my brain enacts the movement. If I see you flinch, my body recalls the sensation. If I see you smile or wince, my nervous system echoes the emotion. This kind of simulation creates a shortcut to understanding. Instead of analysing your expression, comparing it to past memories and constructing an intellectual theory of your mood, my brain quietly models your experience and lets me feel it. It is, in essence, the biological root of empathy. Empathy is more than sympathy. It's not just recognising another's pain, it's sharing it, at least partially. Mirror neurons provide the foundation for this ability, but the experience is shaped by countless other brain regions, including the insula, the anterior cingulate cortex, and the amygdala. These areas help interpret emotional states, regulate your own feelings, and make decisions based on social context. Together, they form a network that lets you inhabit, not fully but meaningfully, the emotional landscape of another person. From an evolutionary perspective, this capacity offers enormous advantages. In social species, cooperation is key. Groups that can coordinate behaviour, share resources, and soothe each other's distress are more likely to survive. Empathy enables trust, bonding, and teaching. It encourages fairness. It discourages cruelty. And while not perfect, humans are capable of both compassion and violence. It represents a vital step away from pure instinct and toward conscious connection. Even infants show signs of empathetic behaviour. A baby who hears another baby crying will often begin to cry in response. As children grow, they learn to comfort, to mimic emotions, to understand that others have thoughts and feelings separate from their own. This developmental process, known as theory of mind, matures gradually, but forms the bedrock of human social life. Conversations, relationships, even humour rely on the ability to infer what someone else might be thinking or feeling. Interestingly, empathy doesn't always require sight. Studies show that people who are blind from birth still respond to the emotional tone of voice and touch with the same regions of the brain. Empathy is not tied to a single sense. It is a deep, flexible capacity that draws on multiple channels to construct a picture of another's experience. And it doesn't stop with people. Many animals, particularly mammals and birds, show signs of empathetic behaviour. Elephants comfort distressed companions. Rats will free trapped cage mates even without reward. Dogs respond to human emotions with changes in posture and gaze. These actions suggest that empathy, in its various forms, may be more widespread in the animal kingdom than once believed. In humans, this trait has been elevated into culture. Art, literature, music, theatre, all are attempts to evoke shared experience. When you read a novel and feel the character's loss, or hear a piece of music and weep, or watch a film and tremble with fear, you are participating in a deeply human ritual. using your mind to meet another mind, across space and time. Mirror neurons may fire when watching someone move, but the broader emotional system enables you to reach across boundaries and connect with someone who isn't even present. Empathy is also key to learning. In classrooms, imitation is often the first step toward mastery. A teacher demonstrates, a student mirrors. Feedback loops between action and observation allow for fine-tuning and correction. This is not just mimicry, it's internal rehearsal, guided by an intuitive sense of what the other person intends. But empathy has limits. It is strongest when the other feels familiar, when they look like us, speak like us, act like us. That's why expanding empathy across social, cultural and ideological lines is one of the great challenges of civilization. The biological machinery exists, but it must be trained, stretched and encouraged. Education, storytelling and shared experience all help widen its reach. And as you lie quietly now, perhaps remembering a moment when someone offered you comfort, or when you instinctively reached out to another without thinking, consider how effortless that gesture felt. As if your body knew something before your words did. As if your neurons mirrored a truth older than logic. That too is evolution's gift. Not the biggest brain or the fastest reflexes, but the growing ability to care. You are not just a creature that thinks, you are one that feels with. And in that quiet resonance between bodies and minds, something beautiful persists. Somewhere in the long dusk between silence and speech, our ancestors began to shape sound, not just to cry or call, but to communicate, to name, to share something more than presence. It's easy to overlook how strange this ability is, to use breath and muscle and timing to send invisible signals into the air, and to trust that someone else will catch them and understand. Language is one of the most complex tools your body and brain can wield, and like all tools, it had to be built, piece by subtle piece. To speak, the body had to evolve a physical instrument capable of fine control. In early mammals, the larynx, or voice box, was positioned high in the throat, which allowed breathing and swallowing to happen nearly simultaneously, a useful arrangement for animals who needed to suckle while staying alert. But for nuanced speech, that configuration was a barrier. At some point in hominin evolution, the larynx descended, opening up a longer vocal tract. This change allowed for a richer variety of vowel sounds and more detailed articulation, but it came with a cost. The risk of choking increased. Evolution, as always, trades safety for capability. At the same time, the tongue grew more flexible and muscular, capable of intricate movements that shape sound within the mouth. The lips and jaw evolved finer motor control, allowing for rapid shifts between consonants and vowels. And inside the brain, regions dedicated to processing and producing language expanded in complexity. Chief among them are Broca's area, involved in speech production and syntax, and Wernicke's area, which helps us understand language and meaning. These two regions, though often highlighted, are merely hubs in a vast network that spans both hemispheres, coordinating sound, structure, memory, and intention. But none of this could have happened without a deeper molecular shift. At the centre of this transformation lies a gene called FOXP2. Sometimes called the language gene, FOXP2 isn't responsible for language by itself. No single gene could be, but it plays a critical role in speech and vocal learning. First identified in a family with a rare disorder that impaired their ability to form words, the gene was later found to differ slightly between humans and our closest relatives. These tiny changes appear to affect how brain circuits develop for timing, sequencing and motor control, skills essential not only for speech but for the rhythms of language. FOXP exists in many animals, including birds that learn songs, but the human variant seems particularly suited to the demands of spoken language. It is active during development in brain regions associated with movement and coordination, especially those that connect planning with execution. In a way, FOXP2 helps link the idea of a word with the muscle memory needed to say it. And while language continues to develop after birth through imitation and social learning, this genetic foundation, makes, that's all, learning possible. Still, language is more than speech. Before words come thoughts, and before thoughts come patterns, the ability to recognise, predict and symbolise. The roots of language likely stretch back into gestures, facial expressions and shared rituals. Even today, children who are deaf from birth but not taught a formal language often invent gesture-based communication systems on their own, structured with grammar and consistency. This suggests that the capacity for language is innate, not to specific sounds, but to structured expression itself. As language developed, so too did the brain's architecture for handling it. MRI scans show that language tasks light up areas beyond Broca's and Wernicke's, networks that involve memory, emotion, and even motor planning. Understanding a sentence isn't just decoding words, it's mentally simulating what those words represent. When someone says, "he threw the ball," your brain activates regions associated with movement. If the sentence is emotional, "she whispered goodbye," other circuits related to social understanding and empathy come online. Language is not a code, it is an experience you recreate in your mind. And the more we learn to speak, the more we reshape the world through speech. Stories passed down, instructions shared, emotions named. Over time, language became the engine of culture, allowing ideas to accumulate across generations. Through words, knowledge could be stored outside the body, in song, in myth, in writing. The brain didn't have to carry everything on its own anymore, and yet the act of speaking remained deeply embodied, still tied to breath, posture, rhythm and voice. Interestingly, speech also changed the way humans relate to silence. Other animals communicate through sound, songs, growls, calls, but humans learn to hold silence to listen, to wait, to think. The pause between words becomes part of the message. This attentiveness to pacing, to the space between sounds, is part of what gives language its depth. In many ways, silence is speech's shadow, and the two evolve together. And here you are now, reading or perhaps listening to these words shaped long after night has settled. You're not moving your mouth, yet the language enters your mind, triggers meaning, emotion, memory. That's the legacy of the FOXP2 gene, the reshaped larynx, the folded cortex. You can hear a voice without sound, feel presence through syntax alone. And when the moment comes that you speak to someone, whether in kindness, warning or wonder, you're using not just air and muscle, but millions of years of evolutionary invention. Each word is a ripple in time, carrying echoes of all those who shaped sound before you, and within those ripples, thought finds form. Memory is not stored in a single vault or shelf within your mind. It is woven throughout your body's tissues, spread across networks of neurons layered into chemical traces and electrical loops that flicker silently beneath thought. It is not just something you have, it is something you are. You remember with more than just your brain. You remember with your breath, your muscles, your heartbeat and your posture. And long before memory became something you could name, it was already there, guiding you quietly through time. In its simplest form, memory is the ability to change based on experience. Even the most basic organisms display this. A single-celled creature may withdraw faster after repeated touch, responding to a pattern it cannot consciously grasp. This form of primitive learning, habituation, lays the groundwork for something more. The ability not just to react, but to store traces of the past and let them influence the future. As nervous systems grew more complex, so did memory. In vertebrates, and particularly mammals, we see the emergence of specialized brain structures responsible for encoding, consolidating, and retrieving information. At the center of this system is the hippocampus, a small seahorse-shaped structure tucked deep within the temporal lobe. Its job is to assemble fragments of experience, what you saw, what you heard, how you felt, and turn them into a cohesive whole. It doesn't store memories forever, but acts more like a librarian, organizing and indexing them so that they can be transferred and retrieved later from other parts of the brain. The hippocampus is especially active during periods of high emotion, which is why moments of fear, love, or awe are often remembered with vivid clarity. It is also active during sleep, particularly in the stage known as slow wave sleep, when memories from the day are quietly replayed, rehearsed, and strengthened. You might think of this process like pressing flowers between pages, preserving the outline and essence of a lived moment. But memory isn't singular. It exists in layers and types. Working memory lets you hold a phone number in your mind just long enough to dial it. Short-term memory carries the echo of a sentence you just heard. Long-term memory stores the names of childhood friends, the route to your favourite cafe, the lyrics of a song you haven't sung in years. Each type depends on different brain regions and processes, yet all are integrated into the larger choreography of remembering. Interestingly, the brain does not store memories like files in a drawer. It reconstructs them. Each time you remember something, your brain rebuilds the event from sensory fragments, emotional colouring and contextual knowledge. In doing so, it can modify the memory, sometimes strengthening it, sometimes distorting it. This is not a flaw, it's a feature. Memory is not meant to be perfect, it's meant to be useful, adaptable, emotionally resonant. It helps you navigate the present by drawing patterns from the past, even if some of the details are soft around the edges. Some memories live close to the surface, others rest deeper, surfacing only when triggered by a smell, a song, or a sudden shift in light. The scent of pine may return you to a campsite long forgotten. A single phrase might stir an entire conversation from years ago. This quality of associative memory, where one experience calls forth another, is part of what gives life its richness. Your mind is constantly building bridges between moments, connecting one flicker of time to another in a quiet, ongoing web. And then there are the emotional memories stored in the body. You might tense at a sound that reminds you of danger. You might feel warmth from a touch that echoes a moment of love. These responses are not always conscious. The amygdala, a small almond-shaped structure near the hippocampus, plays a key role in attaching emotional significance to memories. It helps determine what is worth remembering and what can fade. A single frightening event may be etched deeply into memory because your survival might one day depend on recalling it. But memory is not only about the past, it is also how you imagine the future. When you picture what might happen tomorrow, your brain uses many of the same networks that it uses for remembering yesterday. It draws on known patterns, emotional tones, familiar settings. In this way, the act of remembering is also the act of forecasting. You use memory not just to relive, but to rehearse, to plan, to dream. And yes, dreaming itself may be a kind of memory in motion. During REM sleep, the brain sifts through experience, emotion, unresolved questions. It reshapes and recombines fragments into strange narratives that sometimes reflect your life, sometimes distort it into viewable, surreal landscapes. No one knows exactly why we dream, but one theory suggests that it helps the brain simulate scenarios, trying out responses in a safe internal theatre. Memory in that sense becomes imaginative rehearsal. Throughout life, memory shifts. In youth it grows rapidly, absorbing language, movement and relationship at astonishing speeds. In adulthood, it stabilizes, refined by repetition and meaning. In aging, it softens, not disappearing, but becoming more selective, more impressionistic. Yet even when specific details fade, emotional memory often remains. The feeling of love, the ache of loss, the smile of someone long gone. And so your body continues to remember, not only with neurons, but with habits, reactions, and quiet intuitions. The way you hold your hands when nervous, the route your feet take on a familiar walk, the song that comes unbidden in stillness. You're not just a vessel for memory, you're a living expression of it. So tonight, as your thoughts drift and settle, know that your mind is still at work. Not straining, but sorting, filing, weaving. The memories of today are finding their place. The memories of years past are gently folded deeper. And somewhere in between, your dreaming self begins to stir, preparing to walk again through the strange gardens of the remembered and the imagined. You've likely eaten today maybe something warm and soft, perhaps something crunchy, sweet or savoury, and without needing to think about it, your body is quietly breaking it all down, bit by molecular bit, into something it can use. You chew, you swallow, you wait. But behind the scenes, the story of digestion unfolds, one that began not with forks or fire, but with membranes drifting in ancient seas. In the earliest forms of life, digestion was neither internal nor complex. It happened on the surface. Molecules from the environment simply passed through the thin membranes of single-celled organisms, absorbed directly into their soft interiors. There were no mouths, no stomachs, no enzymes, just the basic chemistry of survival, nutrients in, waste out. But even this simple act, selectively taking in what was needed and rejecting what was not, was a profound evolutionary step. It marked the beginning of a boundary between self and world, a membrane that defined not only shape but function. As life diversified and cells began to specialize, feeding strategies grew more elaborate. Some organisms evolved engulfing behaviors, surrounding bits of food and drawing them inside to be digested. Others developed mouths and rudimentary guts, tubes that allowed food to enter at one end, be processed internally and exit at the other. This tubular design was a leap in efficiency. It allowed for directional flow, separating the steps of digestion into distinct zones: intake, breakdown, absorption, and expulsion. The evolution of the digestive tract brought with it a parade of supporting organs. The mouth, with its teeth and tongue, became a place for mechanical breakdown. The salivary glands began secreting enzymes to initiate chemical digestion. The esophagus formed a muscular corridor to the stomach where acids and enzymes took over, denaturing proteins and breaking down complex molecules. Beyond that, the small intestine unfolded into a long, highly folded pathway lined with villi and microvilli, structures designed to maximize surface area, ensuring every last nutrient could be extracted. The liver, pancreas and gallbladder joined in, contributing bile, enzymes, and buffering solutions to fine-tune the process. And finally, the large intestine absorbed water, compacted waste, and completed the long journey from supper to stool. But the digestive system isn't just a biological machine, it's also a story of adaptation. The kind of food an animal eats shapes the way its gut evolves. Carnivores with high-protein diets tend to have short digestive tracts optimized for rapid absorption. Herbivores, who must extract nutrients from tough plant fibers, often possess long, multi-chambered systems, sometimes with fermentation chambers like the rumen in cows. Omnivores like humans fall somewhere in between, built for variety, flexibility and improvisation. For much of human prehistory, raw food was the norm. Chewing was slow, jaws were wide, and much energy was spent processing meals physically rather than chemically. But then something extraordinary happened. We harnessed fire. With it came a revolution. Cooking softened tough fibers, neutralized toxins, and unlocked calories that had previously been inaccessible. Suddenly, food could be pre-digested before it even entered the mouth. This meant shorter guts, smaller jaws, and more available energy, all of which may have helped fuel the growth of the human brain, one of the body's most energy-demanding organs. This shift wasn't only biological, it was also cultural. Cooking brought people together. It encouraged sharing, planning, and waiting. Meals became social rituals, rich in symbolism, custom, and memory. In many cultures, what is eaten, when, and with whom speaks volumes about identity, hierarchy, and belonging. And even today, the comfort of a familiar dish or the nostalgia of a family recipe carries a weight far beyond nutrition. Yet the digestive system doesn't care about symbolism. It operates on chemistry and timing. Its rhythms are slow and steady, tuned by hormones and nerves. Ghrelin rises when the stomach is empty, nudging you to seek food. Leptin, secreted by fat cells, whispers that you've had enough. The brain listens, interprets, sometimes overrides. Digestion is not just mechanical, it's emotional, tied deeply to mood, memory, and mental state. That's why a stressful day might unsettle your stomach, or why a comforting meal can soothe more than just your hunger. The gut and brain are linked by a vast web of nerves, particularly the vagus nerve, which carries signals in both directions. This connection is so strong that scientists now refer to the gut as the second brain, a system of millions of neurons and a microbiome that influences not just digestion, but emotion, cognition, and even decision making. And when you rest at night, your digestive system doesn't stop. It continues to churn, absorb, and calibrate. The quiet gurgles in your belly are signs of this long, slow process, a reminder that your body is still at work, drawing energy from the world, keeping you nourished. So tonight, as your breath deepens and your thoughts drift, remember that beneath the stillness, your body is alive with motion. Molecules are being broken, sorted, and sent where they are needed. A system born in single cells, retched and refined by eons of change, continues its soft, tireless labour, transforming food into memory, muscle, and life. You are not just one creature, you are a community. Within and upon you live trillions of tiny organisms, bacteria, viruses, fungi, and archaea. Some helpful, some neutral, some potentially harmful. Together they outnumber your own cells, and yet you rarely think of them. You move through the world imagining a solitary self, but you are in truth a walking ecosystem, a living experiment in symbiosis. And at the heart of that experiment is the system that keeps it all in balance, your immune system. When we picture the immune system, we often imagine a battlefield. White blood cells as tiny soldiers, antibodies as arrows, viruses as invaders to be vanquished. And while the imagery is not entirely wrong, it is also incomplete. The immune system is not simply a weapon. It is also a translator, a mediator, a diplomat. Its true genius lies not in aggression, but in discernment. Its ability to tell friend from foe, self from not self, threat from harmless presence. In the earliest animals, immune defense was basic. If a foreign cell entered the body, it was engulfed and digested. This innate immunity, shared by all multicellular organisms, is fast and general. It responds to patterns, not specific threats. A bacterium with a certain surface marker is flagged and destroyed, whether it's the first time or the 100th. It's like a guard who reacts to any unfamiliar face. But evolution soon added a second layer, adaptive immunity. This system is slower to respond but infinitely more precise. It learns, it remembers. If you're exposed to a virus, your adaptive immune cells begin crafting customized antibodies, tiny Y-shaped molecules designed to lock onto specific invaders like keys into locks. And if that same virus returns years later, your body remembers how to respond. This is the principle behind vaccination, which teaches your immune system the face of an enemy before battle begins. The key players in this complex system include T cells, which patrol the body seeking infected or abnormal cells, B cells, which produce antibodies, macrophages, which engulf pathogens and signal danger, and dendritic cells, which act as messengers, ferrying information between systems. Together, these cells form a dynamic, adaptive network, more like a decentralized intelligence agency than an army. They work in chemical languages, signaling across distances with cytokines and other molecular cues, adjusting tactics based on what they find. But the immune system doesn't operate in a vacuum. It evolved alongside the vast microbial world, and nowhere is this relationship more intimate than in your gut. Within the winding corridors of your intestines live hundreds of species of bacteria, your gut microbiota. Far from being passive passengers, these microbes help digest food, synthesize vitamins, protect against pathogens, and even influence your mood and behaviour. They outnumber your own genes by a factor of over 100, and while many of them could be dangerous in the wrong context, your immune system has learned to tolerate, even nurture them. This delicate relationship begins at birth. A baby born through the birth canal is coated in maternal microbes. Breast milk contains not only nutrients but prebiotics, special sugars designed not to feed the infant, but to feed the infant's gut bacteria. From the very beginning, your immune system is shaped not just by your genes, but by your microbial companions. They train your immune cells, teach them which signals to ignore, which threats to take seriously. In return, your body provides them with warmth, moisture, and a steady supply of food. When this balance is disturbed by illness, antibiotics, or dietary changes, the effects ripple throughout the body. Inflammation can rise, allergies can flare, metabolic systems can falter. More and more research now suggests that autoimmune disorders in which the immune system mistakenly attacks the body's own tissues may arise from disruptions in this microbial dialogue. Without the right signals from the gut, the immune system loses its calibration, and the communication isn't one way. Your gut microbes also send signals to the brain, via the vagus nerve, the bloodstream, and even through the immune system itself. This gut-brain immune axis means that what you eat, how you feel, and how your body defends itself are deeply interconnected. A shift in one affects the others. The immune system is not just a gatekeeper, it's a conductor, tuning the orchestra of your internal life. And like all great conductors, it thrives on balance. Too much tolerance and infection spreads. Too much aggression, and your own cells become collateral damage. Evolution has sculpted this system not to achieve victory, but to maintain harmony. To keep the peace among countless actors, some old friends, some new strangers, some ancient threats re-emerging in altered forms. Even now, as you lie quietly, this invisible system is awake. It monitors your bloodstream, it listens to the signals of your microbiota, it repairs small injuries, clears cellular debris, and prepares for the next intrusion, even if it never comes. Most of the time, you don't notice it at all. That's the goal. An immune system at peace is one that does its work without needing to wake the conscious mind. So the next time you feel a scratch in your throat or a slight fever, remember that these discomforts are not signs of weakness, but of activity. They mean your body has noticed something, responded, and begun its quiet work. And when you feel well, when nothing hurts, when energy is steady, when the days flow without interruption, that too is your immune system, quietly succeeding. In a world full of microscopic guests, your body has chosen cooperation over isolation. Not by surrendering, but by learning to live together. 1,000 tiny treaties negotiated moment by moment, held in place by cells that remember. Imagine a body in perfect stillness. No words spoken, no sudden gestures. And yet beneath the skin, a quiet conversation unfolds. Signals rising, travelling, adjusting, responding. Unlike the rapid-fire messages of the nervous system, these are chemical messengers, slow and deliberate, drifting through the bloodstream to deliver instructions that might take seconds, hours, or even years to complete. These messengers are hormones, and together they form the basis of one of the most ancient and finely tuned systems in your body, the endocrine system, where nerves operate like a direct phone line, fast, specific, and wired. The endocrine system works more like a public radio broadcast. A signal is released into the bloodstream, and only the cells equipped with the right receivers can interpret and act upon it. It's a strategy built not for speed, but for coordination across distance, especially when processes must unfold in rhythm rather than reflex. The story of hormones begins long before humans or even vertebrates. Simple marine animals like jellyfish and worms were already using basic chemical cues to regulate reproduction, growth, and defense. These early signals weren't hormones in the modern sense, but they laid the foundation for what would become an intricate network of communication. As bodies grew more complex, new structures evolved to produce, store, and release these chemicals with greater control. These structures became the endocrine glands. each with its own specialty, but all working in concert to maintain balance. At the top of the hierarchy sits the hypothalamus, a small structure deep in the brain that acts as a bridge between the nervous and endocrine systems. When it detects a change, like a drop in temperature or rising stress, it sends signals to the pituitary gland, often called the master gland. The pituitary, no larger than a pea, releases hormones that control other glands throughout the body. The thyroid in the neck, which regulates metabolism, the adrenal glands above the kidneys, which respond to stress, the pancreas, which manages blood sugar, and the gonads, ovaries or testes, which produce sex hormones crucial for development, reproduction, and even emotional tone. But what makes this system remarkable is not its power, it's the subtlety of its timing. Hormones operate through feedback loops. When a gland releases a hormone, that chemical not only performs its task, but eventually loops back to inform the system whether more is needed. If thyroid hormone levels rise too high, for example, the brain reduces the signal to produce more. This creates a self-regulating mechanism, a kind of internal thermostat that keeps your body's processes within the bounds of health. These loops allow for exquisite sensitivity. They can adjust heart rate, appetite, growth rate, and reproductive timing, not in reaction to single events, but in response to patterns and context. The endocrine system is what allows a body to anticipate and prepare, not just react. Consider the role of cortisol, the hormone most associated with stress. When you face a challenge, an exam, a looming deadline, a loud noise, your adrenal glands release cortisol, helping mobilize energy, sharpen focus, and suppress non-essential systems like digestion. This response is ancient and life-saving in acute danger. But when stress becomes chronic and cortisol remains elevated, the same mechanisms that once protected you begin to wear you down, affecting sleep, immunity, mood, and memory. It's not the hormone that's the problem, it's the signal being stuck in the on position for too long. Other hormones govern equally vital processes. Insulin, released by the pancreas, allows cells to absorb glucose from the bloodstream. When insulin fails or cells stop responding, blood sugar rises, leading to diabetes. Estrogen and testosterone, though best known for their roles in sexual development, also affect bone density, mood, and cognition. Melatonin, released as darkness falls, prepares the body for sleep by gently lowering core temperature and signaling the brain to unwind. Each hormone works not in isolation, but as part of a whispering orchestra, keeping time with your daily cycles, nutritional intake, and emotional landscape. Interestingly, hormones don't only respond to the body, they help shape the mind. Many mood disorders involve disruptions in hormonal balance. Depression, anxiety, fatigue, and even memory issues can be traced back to subtle imbalances in thyroid levels, adrenal output, or reproductive hormones. Conversely, changes in emotional state, grief, excitement, fear can alter hormone levels. It's a two-way street. The chemical and the emotional are deeply entangled. The evolutionary elegance of the endocrine system lies in its versatility. It governs the rapid surge of adrenaline during a sprint, the slow steady rise of growth hormone during sleep, the month-long orchestration of menstrual cycles, the decades-long arc of puberty, and even the soft decline into the hormonal quiet of old age. Each stage of life brings a shift in this conversation. The voice changes, but the dialogue never ends, and it is largely invisible. You cannot hear your thyroid adjusting your metabolism, or your pituitary deciding whether to nudge your adrenal glands. You don't feel melatonin rising in your bloodstream as a night deepens. These are movements beneath awareness, yet they shape your entire experience. How tired you feel, how hungry you are, how calmly or urgently the world seems to press in. So tonight, as your body settles into its evening rhythm, as your breathing slows and your heart rate dips slightly, remember that this too is a hormonal act. Somewhere deep within, your glands are sending signals of quiet, of restoration, of pause. and while your conscious mind prepares for rest, your endocrine system continues its subtle work, balancing, adjusting, preparing for the world that awaits tomorrow. Long before alarm clocks, electric lights, or the midnight screens, life on Earth beat to a quieter rhythm, one shaped not by schedules or seconds, but by the slow rotation of the planet itself. Day followed night, light yielded to darkness, warmth dissolved into chill, and through these gentle cycles, life learned to rest. From the simplest bacteria to the most complex mammals, organisms evolved to live not continuously, but rhythmically. And at the heart of that rhythm is something so ordinary, so consistent, that we rarely stop to consider its evolutionary depth. Sleep. To sleep is to surrender. Not forever, and not in weakness, but in trust. During sleep you cannot run or watch or speak, and yet every night your body guides you into this vulnerable state because it knows something your waking mind forgets. That rest is not optional. It is fundamental. Across billions of years, evolution has not found a better solution than this daily pause. A quiet interlude that preserves energy, repairs tissues, sorts memories, recalibrates emotion, and renews attention. But sleep is more than stillness. Beneath the surface, your body and brain are alive with activity, orchestrated by internal biological clocks that measure not hours and minutes but changes in light, temperature, and hormone levels. Chief among these clocks is the suprachiasmatic nucleus, or SCN, a tiny bundle of neurons tucked within the hypothalamus, just above the place where your optic nerves cross. It receives information directly from your eyes and uses it to coordinate your circadian rhythms, roughly 24-hour cycles that govern not just sleep but digestion, hormone release, body temperature, and mood. When the light begins to fade, the SCN signals the pineal gland to release melatonin, a hormone that gently nudges your body towards sleep. Heart rate slows, core temperature drops, muscles relax, brainwaves shift from alertness into slower patterns. But these changes are not abrupt. They unfold gradually, like dusk moving across a landscape. You don't fall asleep, you drift into it, led by signals your conscious self doesn't need to manage. Interestingly, these rhythms persist even in total darkness. Studies with humans in isolated caves and animals in controlled environments show that circadian rhythms continue, usually with a slightly longer cycle, around 24.2 hours, requiring daily cues from the environment known as Zeitgebers to stay aligned. Light is the most powerful of these cues, but food, temperature, and even social interaction can help reset the body's clock. When these cues are disrupted, as during jet lag, shift work, or insomnia, your body struggles to function smoothly. Memory falters, mood darkens, appetite changes, the harmony slips. But why do we sleep at all? If wakefulness is useful, time for feeding, mating, creating, and exploring, why would evolution favour a state of temporary inactivity? The answer lies in trade-offs. Sleep may leave you vulnerable, but it also conserves energy at times when activity would be inefficient or dangerous, like at night for diurnal animals or during the heat of day for desert dwellers. More than that, sleep allows the body to shift focus from external tasks to internal maintenance. During deep sleep, tissues are repaired, growth hormones are released, and the immune system strengthens its defences. In the brain, sleep is a time of extraordinary organisation. The day's experiences are sorted and consolidated. Neural connections that were strengthened through learning are reinforced. Those that are unnecessary begin to fade. In REM sleep, where dreams occur most vividly, emotional content is processed, creativity is enhanced, and new ideas are integrated. It is during sleep that short-term memory begins the transformation into long-term knowledge. Sleep also plays a vital role in metabolic regulation. Hormones like leptin and ghrelin, which control hunger and satiety, are influenced by how much and how well you sleep. When sleep is shortened, ghrelin levels rise, leptin drops, and the result is often increased appetite and reduced metabolic efficiency. Over time, chronic sleep deprivation has been linked to insulin resistance, cardiovascular issues, and cognitive decline. In this way, sleep acts not just as a nightly refresh, but as a safeguard against long-term imbalance. Even your body temperature, heart rate, and blood pressure follow circadian patterns. In the early hours of the morning, your body is at its coolest and most at rest. As dawn approaches, cortisol levels rise, helping you wake and face the day. As light fades again, melatonin returns. These shifts are not sudden. They are slow waves, rippling gently through your system to keep you attuned to the world. And yet, in modern life, this ancient rhythm is often at odds with your environment. Artificial light, round-the-clock work cycles, and digital stimulation confuse the body's internal timekeeping. We push sleep aside as if it were optional, something to be delayed or made up later. But the body does not forget. When sleep is postponed, the system tries to recalibrate. You may feel groggy, unfocused, or emotionally brittle. These are not flaws, they are signals. They are your biology reminding you that you are not built for constant light, endless input, or perpetual productivity. So tonight, as you prepare to rest, remember that sleep is not a break from your biology, it is its expression. Every breath you take while dreaming, every twitch of a limb, every cycling pattern of REM in deep sleep, these are echoes of ancient rhythms, shared with birds, fish, reptiles, and even some plants. Sleep is not weakness, it is strategy. It is a practice honed by evolution to keep you whole. You do not have to earn it. You do not need to resist it. You simply need to allow it. To let the darkness speak and your body listen. There's something quiet but profound about the way you stand. 2 feet planted, spine aligned, head lifted, balanced, vertical, forward-facing. It feels natural now, so much so that you rarely think about what it took for your body to reach this shape. But walking upright, this simple act of bipedalism, is a signature of your lineage, a delicate compromise between structure and movement that took millions of years to refine. It wasn't inevitable. It was chosen, again and again, by forces greater than intention, by terrain, by need, by the slow whisper of evolution shaping bone and balance. The journey began with creatures that still walked on 4 limbs, their spines parallel to the ground, their hands used not just for holding, but for bearing weight. Early primates were built for the trees, gripping branches with opposable toes, swinging or climbing with flexible shoulders and long fingers. Their movement was dynamic, but their posture was horizontal. And for a long time that worked. But the world changed. Forests thinned into savannas. Resources became scattered, and the safety of trees gave way to the open uncertainties of the grasslands. For those who could see farther, travel longer, carry more, the advantage was subtle but real. And from that pressure emerged a gradual shift. Bodies that tilted forward less. Spines that curved to support vertical weight, legs that grew longer, pelvises that rotated, and feet that arched and stiffened into spring-loaded supports. The modern human spine with its S-shaped curve is a marvel of adaptation. It redistributes the weight of the torso so that it balances directly above the pelvis. The pelvis itself became shorter and broader, creating a stable base for standing and walking. The femur angled inward, positioning the knees under the centre of gravity. Feet, once flexible like hands, evolved rigid arches to act like levers with each step. The big toe, once opposable, aligned with the other toes to provide push-off. These changes may sound mechanical, and they are, but their effects reshaped not only how you move, but who you became. Because when the hands were freed from locomotion, they could become instruments of expression. With no need to support body weight, the upper limbs were now available for carrying food, cradling infants, gathering tools, and eventually making them. Hands could mould clay, shape wood, carry water, break open nuts, or hold another's hand in reassurance or warning. dexterity already present in tree climbing ancestors could now be redirected toward entirely new goals. And the benefits didn't stop with tools. Standing upright changed how early humans saw the world. From a higher vantage point, they could scan the horizon for danger or opportunity. Eyes faced forward, gathering stereoscopic depth. Neck muscles and vestibular systems adapted to stabilize the head during walking. Even breathing patterns changed, allowing for sustained exertion over long distances, a trait that helped our ancestors become exceptional endurance walkers, capable of tracking prey across hours, even days. But perhaps most profoundly, walking upright created a new kind of presence. To stand is to announce yourself. To face another while balanced on 2 feet is to offer attention. To signal interest, intent, emotion. The act of rising isn't only physical, it's symbolic. Even today we stand when greeting, when honouring, when preparing to speak or act. The vertical stance became a posture not just of motion but of meaning. Of course, the shift to bipedalism wasn't without its costs. The alignment of the human body is beautiful but precarious. The spine's curve is efficient but vulnerable to stress. The knees and hips, bearing the full load of the body, are prone to wear. The narrow shape of the human birth canal, a byproduct of bipedal pelvic structure, made childbirth more difficult, especially as brain size increased. Evolution did not solve these challenges entirely. It negotiated them, balancing risks against advantages in a long, ongoing compromise. Still, the rewards were transformative. Freed hands led to tools. Tools led to fire. Fire led to cooking, to warmth, to gatherings. Bipedalism was not just a shift in locomotion, it was a gateway to everything else. It allowed the body to specialize, and in doing so it made room for the mind to expand. You're not upright merely because your bones permit it. You're upright because in the slow unfolding of natural history, this posture opened a path toward expression, connection, and imagination. And now, every time you walk, whether briskly across a room, slowly through a forest, or absent-mindedly around your kitchen, you're reenacting a process that began over 6 million years ago. You're balancing on bones shaped by chance, choice, and time. You're propelled by muscles that remember not just how to move, but why. You're tracing footsteps that stretch back to the savannas, to a time when the act of walking was also an act of becoming. So as you settle in, lying horizontal for the night, consider the shape of your body in its upright form. The strength of your feet, the lift of your spine, the stillness your balance allows. It is one of evolution's most elegant experiments, a soft, swaying, adaptable architecture. And within that form you carry not only the memory of motion, but the beginnings of what it meant to be human. It's easy to think of communication as something that happens in words, sentences formed and spoken, text shared and read. But long before language took shape, long before the first tools or fire circles, your ancestors were already speaking, without sound, without letters. They spoke with bodies, with faces, with the soft shift of posture, the lift of an eyebrow, the direction of a gaze, and even now in the most modern moments you still speak this way, often without realizing it, often more truthfully than with words. The human body is a social instrument, shaped by evolution not only to survive in a physical world, but to navigate a social one. Every joint, every muscle, every expression has, over time, been honed not just for function, but for connection. It's a kind of second language, silent, subtle, universal, and it begins with the face. Few species have faces as expressive as ours. With more than 40 muscles dedicated to facial movement, humans can convey an astonishing range of emotions. Joy, sorrow, confusion, delight, skepticism, affection. These aren't just surface signals, they're deeply wired. A smile or frown is not only seen, it's felt. When you see someone else display emotion, your brain may activate in ways that mirror their experience even if you're not aware of it. This echo, this empathetic response is part of what binds us together. One of the smallest but most significant features in this system is the eyebrow. It may seem trivial, but eyebrows amplify emotion, enhance recognition, and make communication more readable from a distance. Alongside them, the whiteness of the eye, known as the sclera, plays a vital role. In most other primates, the eyes are darker and less readable. In humans, the white surrounding the iris creates a visible contrast that makes eye direction clear, so others can see not just your face, but what you're looking at. This ability to follow gaze is essential to shared attention, joint focus, and the kind of cooperation that goes beyond instinct. And then there's touch, language older than sound. Grooming, a behaviour still seen in chimpanzees and other primates, isn't just about cleanliness, it's about bonding. It calms the nervous system, lowers stress hormones, and affirms social closeness. In humans, grooming evolved into gestures like hugging, holding hands, patting a back, stroking a child's hair. These acts carry emotion directly, bypassing language entirely. When you comfort someone, it often begins not with words, but with a hand placed gently on their shoulder. Vocal tone too predates spoken language. Babies can distinguish emotional intent in tone long before they understand words. Across cultures, a soft tone signals care, a sharp tone alerts to danger. Laughter, sighs, cries, gasps, these sounds are universal. They're built into the body, rooted in breath, shaped by diaphragm and larynx. Laughter in particular is a powerful social signal. It can diffuse tension, express joy, or invite bonding. Even playful teasing, a feature of nearly every human culture, relies on shared understanding of tone, timing, and social boundaries. These nonverbal signals form the bedrock of human interaction, and they're not separate from the body. They are the body. Every subtle shift in posture, every tilt of the head, every lean toward or away is a message. When someone crosses their arms, it might mean protection or resistance. When they lean in, it might mean interest or openness. These movements aren't always conscious, but they are noticed. Your nervous system is wired to interpret them, often in milliseconds, drawing on layers of experience and instinct to make sense of what others feel, even before they speak. What's more, these signals are deeply cultural, yet also universal. A nod can mean agreement in many places, but in others it may carry different meaning. Still, the core emotions, fear, surprise, joy, anger, sadness, disgust, are read consistently across the globe. This suggests that while the specific gestures may vary, the capacity to express and recognise emotion through the body is deeply human. Over time, as language emerged and societies grew more complex, these bodily expressions didn't disappear. They wove themselves into spoken interaction. A pause before answering, a glance during conversation, a raised eyebrow to question meaning. These are all part of how we understand one another. Even today, people often say, "It's not what you said, it's how you said it." And more often still, I could tell something was wrong just by the way they looked at me. The human body is a canvas of meaning, painted not only by genetics and anatomy, but by experience, relationship, and intention. It reflects mood, reveals thought, and builds trust. In groups, this becomes amplified. Think of a crowd leaning in to listen, a shared laugh rippling through a room, a moment of collective stillness during grief or awe. These are not orchestrated behaviours. They emerge naturally, driven by shared biology and the deep evolutionary imperative to belong. And as you rest now, breathing slowly in the stillness of night, your body continues to carry this ancient knowledge. The way you curled slightly before sleep, the micro-expressions that softened as your thoughts slowed, the weight of the day settling into the cushion of your limbs. These too are part of the social body, not in display but in memory. The body does not forget how to connect, even when alone. It remembers gestures, glances, warmth. It remembers comfort and tension, laughter and silence. You're not just a thinking mind. You're a body made to be seen, touched, and understood. And in every moment of non-verbal grace, an offered hand, a softened look, a shared breath, you're speaking a language older than words. A language of presence shaped not by grammar, but by the simple act of being together. There's something quietly astonishing about how much humans depend on each other. From the moment you're born, you rely not just on food or warmth, but on touch, gaze, tone, on the presence of others to help make sense of the world. And this dependency isn't a flaw, it's a feature. The human species did not rise to dominance through strength or speed. It thrived through something far more fragile and powerful, connection. You come into the world early, more helpless than most mammals. A baby horse can stand within hours. A baby chimpanzee clings tightly to its mother. But a human infant can neither walk nor feed itself, nor regulate its temperature, nor even fully focus its eyes. What it can do, almost immediately, is connect. From the first breath, a newborn seeks faces, responds to voices, reaches for touch, and in that reaching a bond forms, one that is more than emotional. It is biological, shaped by millions of years of evolutionary adaptation. Longer childhoods offered time for learning, but they also demanded something new from early humans: cooperation. One parent was not enough. Raising a child required shared effort. Other caregivers, grandparents, siblings, even unrelated group members. This cooperative caregiving, or alloparenting, became a key feature of human societies. And to support it, evolution began selecting not just for physical traits, but for social intelligence, the ability to understand others' needs, to anticipate behaviour, to coordinate and share. As groups grew, the ability to communicate became central, and communication wasn't limited to language. It included gestures, imitation, facial expressions, and eventually shared rituals. Children learn not just from instruction, but by watching. They mimicked tool use, mirrored social behaviours, absorbed emotional responses. Teaching became a two-way exchange. Caregivers offered guidance and learners paid close attention. This recursive loop of sharing and refining created the conditions for culture, for knowledge that could outlast any individual and grow across generations. And with culture came stories. Long before written words, humans gathered around fires to speak of what had happened, what could happen, what should happen. These weren't just diversions, they were survival tools, ways to pass on wisdom about the land, the seasons, the stars, the patterns of animals, and the patterns of people. But they were also more than that. Stories bound groups together. They created shared identity, a sense of we that extended beyond blood or proximity. This sense of shared belonging rewired how the brain processed others. Mirror neurons allowed for empathy, but evolution took it further. Humans developed the capacity for theory of mind, the ability to imagine what someone else might think, feel, or believe, even if it differed from your own perspective. This ability underpins everything from humour to deception, from negotiation to art. It allowed humans not just to respond to each other, but to represent each other in the mind. That leap transformed society. From this emerged morality not as a rigid code, but as a fluid understanding of fairness, harm, intention, and repair. In small groups, where every member mattered, social cohesion depended on norms, unspoken agreements about behaviour that could be enforced not only by punishment, but by emotion. Guilt, shame, pride, and loyalty became internal signals, shaped by both biology and culture, guiding individuals toward actions that would sustain the group. And this cooperative tendency extended to strangers. Unlike most animals, humans are capable of ultra-sociality, working together with those outside their immediate family. Trade, alliance, shared labour, collective defence. All of these depend on trust and reputation, both of which require memory, communication, and social cues. Even today, much of what governs society rests on invisible agreements, promises, expectations, understandings that live not in laws but in people. The brain in turn reflects these pressures. Compared to body size, humans have exceptionally large brains, especially in regions tied to social cognition, language, and emotional regulation. The neocortex, where complex thought occurs, expanded not just to understand the world, but to navigate social webs. Some researchers suggest that our brains are as large as they are not to hunt or build, but to manage the intricate demands of living with and among others. Even emotion itself evolved in part to serve this end. Joy strengthens bonds, sadness invites comfort, anger signals boundaries, awe promotes humility and cooperation. These feelings are not random, they are adaptive states tuned by evolution to shape behaviour in ways that foster group cohesion. When someone smiles at you and you feel warmth rise, that is biology at work. When you help someone without needing a reward, that too is part of the architecture. And it is in this architecture, subtle, complex, deeply rooted, that the idea of being human truly emerges. Not in isolation, but in relation. You are who you are, not just because of your genes or your brain, but because of every connection that helped shape you. Every teacher, every friend, every stranger who showed kindness or sparked thought. So now, as you lie in the quiet, perhaps thinking of someone you love, or remembering a moment of shared laughter or a kind word, know that this is not just nostalgia. It is a reflection of what your body and mind were shaped for. Closeness. To walk together, to build together, to rest together. Connection is not an extra, it is the essence, boys. You are not alone in this journey. From the first footsteps, the first words, from ancient fires to modern whispers, your story is one of belonging, of being shaped by others and shaping in a return. And that story continues, quietly even now. As you lie still now, your body resting beneath the hush of night, it continues its quiet work without need for command or effort. Breath flows, the heart beats, muscles soften, cells repair and rebuild. You don't have to think about these things, they simply happen. But they didn't come from nowhere. Every part of you carries a story, every beat, every blink, every breath is the product of billions of years of change, chance, and gentle refinement. You're not simply alive, you're a symphony of survival. The latest verse in a long, patient song sung by life itself. Your story began in water, in molecules that bumped and bound in the warmth of Earth's early oceans. Those first cells, with their fragile membranes and rudimentary chemistry, learned how to take in energy, how to copy themselves, how to adapt. They didn't have brains or blood, but they had momentum, a drive to persist. Over time, some joined forces, forming communities of cells that specialized and shared. Cooperation, not conquest, became the foundation of complexity. Even now, in the deepest workings of your body, collaboration remains the rule. Inside you, every organ has its lineage. Your lungs trace their ancestry back to ancient fish who first drew breath from air. Your heart, with its steady, four-chambered rhythm, evolved from simpler pumps that once moved blood through worm-like ancestors. Your skin, a shield, a sensor, a canvas of emotion, arose from the need to protect, to adapt, to interact with the environment. None of these systems appeared fully formed. Each was sculpted by time, moulded by necessity, revised by environment and opportunity. The bones of your spine, now bearing your weight as you stand upright, began as a notochord in ancient sea creatures, a soft, flexible rod that gave structure to swimming bodies. Over millions of years, vertebrae emerged, locking together for both movement and protection. This backbone became the central pillar of animal life, and later, of human posture. The fact that you can sit, stand, or walk is because nature experimented and iterated for eons. Your hands, those tools of expression and creation, were once fins. They touched coral reefs and riverbeds before they reached for fire, shaped stone, or brushed another's cheek. Fingers lengthened, thumbs rotated, nerves grew more sensitive. The result was not just dexterity, it was freedom. The capacity to shape the world and share that shaping with others. Even your senses, so immediate and intimate, carry deep roots. The light that touches your eyes, the vibrations your ears translate into meaning, the scent that pulls an old memory from hiding, all of these began as simple receptors in single-celled organisms. Over time, they became systems, then sensations, then stories. What you see and feel now is not just perception, it is history filtered through biology. Your brain, that dense forest of neurons, holds the echoes of many paths. Nerve nets in jellyfish, ganglia in worms, expanding cortices in mammals. It grew not all at once, but in waves. From sensation to movement, from emotion to reflection, the brain added layers, like the growth rings of a tree. And within it, memory settled, making room not just for facts, but for faces, for places, for longing and joy and regret. You remember not just with your mind, but with your body. Every response you've learned, every habit you've kept, every rhythm you fall into, they all trace back to some moment of adaptation. And in all of this, nothing is wasted. Even the parts of you that seem messy or prone to failure, back pain, poor eyesight, moments of sadness or confusion, are the remnants of compromises made by evolution, trade-offs accepted in exchange for upright walking, for large brains, for the ability to feel deeply. Perfection was never the goal. Resilience was, which brings us here to this moment of stillness, where all that movement has come to rest. In your chest, the breath that oxygenates your cells is drawn through lungs shaped by both ancient water and ancient fire. In your abdomen, food is being digested by a system born in oceans, honed on land and reshaped by flame and culture. Your bloodstream carries not just nutrients, but memory, signals, hormones. Tiny instructions that link every corner of the body in constant silent conversation. And surrounding all of it, your microbiome, trillions of tiny companions, older than any human lineage, helping to digest, defend and tune your system. You're not a solitary being, you're a community, a walking world of life inside life. So if you ever feel small or uncertain or adrift in the complexity of things, pause and consider this. Your body is not random. It is not accidental. It is a story written in structure, a library of what has worked, what has endured, what has learned to continue. From the cells in your fingertips to the thoughts behind your eyes, you carry the inheritance of everything that came before you. You are a thread in the grand weave of life, a note in the long symphony. And even in stillness, even here in the hush of night, your body sings its quiet, patient part. Close your eyes for a moment, if they haven't already begun to soften with sleep. Breathe gently, just as you've been doing since the day you arrived in this world. Each inhale is a quiet continuity. Each exhale a reminder that your body knows how to be here, how to keep going without asking anything from you, except presence. And as you drift at the edge of wakefulness, it may bring comfort to know that this moment, this soft surrender into rest, is not just a nightly habit. It is something far older than culture, far deeper than routine. It is an inheritance. Long before you were here, long before humans stood upright or shaped stone tools, life learned to pause. Even the simplest bacteria, billions of years ago, adjusted their activity to cycles of light and dark. As Earth spun, light came and went in a rhythm, and organisms began to sync themselves to that cadence. Not consciously, not by choice, but by survival. Those who aligned with the planet's turning had an edge, conserving energy when it was scarce, becoming active when conditions were right. Over time, this circadian rhythm, this inner sense of time, became woven into the fabric of life itself. Your own body carries this rhythm in every cell. Tucked inside your DNA are genes that act like clocks, ticking in quiet coordination with the world outside. They rise and fall with day and night, regulating everything from hormone release to temperature, hunger, and alertness. And at the centre of it all, a small bundle of neurons in the brain, the suprachiasmatic nucleus, receives signals from your eyes and sets the tempo. When darkness falls, it nudges your system toward rest. When light returns, it stirs you gently back to wakefulness. This process has unfolded for millions of years, and you are part of that pattern now, whether you notice it or not. Even sleep itself, the process of slipping from awareness into stillness, is a deeply evolved state. It is not downtime or delay. It is a shift in focus, a redirection of effort. During sleep, your muscles rest. Yes, but your brain becomes quietly active. It sifts through memories, prunes unneeded pathways, strengthens the ones that matter. Dreams rise like dust through light, shaped by emotion, memory, and imagination. Tissues repair, hormones reset, immune cells patrol. The body doesn't turn off, it turns inward. And this return to rest is not merely functional, it is poetic. To sleep is to return to rhythm, to participate in a chorus that has echoed since the ocean first stirred with life. Fish sleep, birds dream, cats curl into themselves, eyes half-lidded in peace. Even trees have their rhythms, leaves folding and unfolding with the sun. When you sleep, you join them. You join the great ongoing rest between movements, the hush between heartbeats. Think of it this way. Your bed is not just a place to lie down. It is a kind of shoreline, the edge between one day and the next. Like the tide pulling back before it returns, you step into sleep not as an end, but as a beginning. You let go, not because everything is finished, but because your body knows how to continue without you. There is a profound trust in this, a quiet confidence that you do not have to do everything, know everything, control everything. You only have to rest, and in resting you honour the evolutionary story you carry. The cells in your body were once part of something simpler, something drifting in warmth and water. They learned to work together, to adapt, to persist. That same persistence is in you now, in the soft rhythm of your breath, in the even pulse of your heart. Whether the day was filled with complexity or calm, whether your mind is full or empty, your body brings you here, to this stillness, without judgment. It doesn't ask you to succeed. It asks you only to trust the rhythm. So as you settle into sleep, imagine yourself floating, not through air, not through dreams yet, but through history, floating through the long, slow currents of evolution, held by time, carried gently by biology. You're not drifting away. You're returning to your breath, to your bones, to the hum of systems that have always known what to do. Your stardust and seawater, your firelight and fingerprint. You're ancient even now, and sleep, this soft descent, is the final gesture of the day. A closing line in a song that began before there were voices to sing it. No effort is needed now, just rest. Let the rhythm carry you.